In this video, we are going to go through the Managing Incidents module for TryHackMe that has a total of 4 videos in it. And these 4 videos are the Introduction to Incident Response and Incident Management, which essentially is a concept overview, a topic overview of what those two things actually are and what they mean. And then we go into the logging for accountability, which is essentially the role that accountability would play in incident response and what logging can do to serve that specific goal. So we use Splunk and we go through certain logs to try to catch somebody that did something that they shouldn't have done, and we're essentially just using some logs to try to keep that person accountable. And then we have becoming a first responder. So understanding what a first responder actually is, and a lot of times it's not even the person that is inside the blue team or inside the security department, and how the role of a first responder applies to everything that is going on inside of incident response and incident management, and what to do if you are that person, and what to do if you need to train those people. And finally, cyber crisis management, which is really the highest level of a cyber incident, when it goes from just being an incident that needs to be handled to an all-out crisis, that there needs to be some really big actions taken, and the C-suite executives are involved and all the stakeholders are involved, so on and so forth. And they call these nuclear actions. So these are actions that are going to ultimately affect the entire business and everything that is carried out from that moment on. So without further ado, let us jump into our very first video of this series, which is going to be the Intro to Incident Response and Incident Management. These are all of the attacks that are happening across the world right now, and notice how many of them are actually going towards the United States or whatever country that you're in, really. So the question is not whether or not you will get attacked or if you will get attacked. The question is when you get attacked, and the company that you work for or the entity that you work for, when that company or that entity is going to get attacked. And when a company or a country or any organization or a person gets attacked, the response to that and the management of that incident is going to be very, very important. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, which is the Introduction to Incident Response and Incident Management, which is a very, very important topic. And this is a part of Managing Incidents module that's inside of the TryHackMe pathway for security engineers. So we're going to be talking about the intro to IR and IM, then we're going to go with logging for accountability, becoming a first responder, which is a very important role in cybersecurity, and of course cyber crisis management. And these are very, very important topics when it comes down to cybersecurity. Most likely you're going to end up in some kind of an incident response or an incident management role at some point in your career, especially if you're planning on being in cybersecurity on the pen test or on the defensive side. Doesn't really matter. Incident response and incident management is a very important topic that happens because attacks are happening all the time. As you look at it, this is literally happening all the time between different countries. If we look at the United States, you look at the different or the source, I guess, is the United States attacking different countries, and then you have the source being Russia attacking different countries. So it's like it's happening literally all the time to different destinations, different organizations, different countries, and this is not a small topic. So this is something that you need to be very, very aware of, and you need to be very good at responding to and managing responses to. So that being said, let's actually jump into the introduction of this particular course or this video and the objectives that we have. So the basic understanding of IR and IM, understanding the difference between response and management, understanding the different roles during an incident, understanding the process of incident management, and understanding the common issues that occur during an incident and how you can prevent those things from happening to you. So a prerequisite for this is Intro to Defensive Security, which is something that we have already recorded. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go and check it out. It is going to be on our channel. So all you got to do is just go search right here to Intro to Defensive Security and you will find the video for it. So without further ado, let us jump into the actual content of the course. All right, if you don't already know, a cyber incident is really something that happens in the cyber world, in the digital world, and it could be any things that can happen. What happens during a cyber incident, or what happens in a cybersecurity environment, is you have the security operations center, and in the security operations center, there's a bunch of different teams, and it could be the analyst teams, it could be the IR team, the incident response team. But what happens is that there's events that are being monitored, and if there's an event that is an anomaly or unexpected, basically it could be a 0-day event, it could be something that is out of the baseline, out of the ordinary, an alert is generated, and then the alert could be a false positive, obviously, so it could just be something that happened because the system wasn't detecting what it should be detecting, or it was too sensitive when it was configured. But if the alert is not a false positive, if it's an actual real alert, then that is now considered to be an incident. And in that situation, there needs to be some kind of a response. And that incident could lead to severe damage if it's not caught properly, and if it's not responded to accordingly and with enough urgency, so on and so forth. So this is where it becomes a very, very important topic, because as you saw from that map, incidents happen all the time. There are people and organizations that are attacking countries and different companies all the time. And there needs to be a team in place that knows exactly how to expect these things, and you maintain your cool and you maintain your composure as everything happens, so that you can go ahead and properly respond to that incident. Now, when you look at something like that, when there's an alert that's been generated, the basic set of questions that we need to be answering is whose account was used when that kind of an alert is happening, where did the logon occur from, where was that account being used before the logon, and has there been any other potentially anomalous activity seen within that account. And they're specifically talking to, in this particular case, something obviously that was relevant to one particular account. So an alert was generated that an anomalous logon occurred to one of our servers, and we need to answer a bunch of different questions. So if somebody tried to log onto the server from an account that is out of the ordinary, that's basically what anomalous means. It's an anomaly, it's out of the ordinary. And when something like that happens, we need to be able to answer some of these very basic questions to try to figure out how to respond to that incident. If it's severe enough, if there's sufficient severity, the alert can be turned into an incident, and then we're going to respond to various types of incidents, and there's levels to this. So when you see level 1, level 2, level 3, those are the types of stuff that they hire for. When they want to hire for a level 1 incident responder or a level 2 analyst, when you see stuff like that, that it's actually referring to the severity of the level that that person is going to be dealing with. So incident response and management has two different types of categories, essentially. The first is incident response, and it covers the technical aspect of dealing with an incident. This is the portion that's responsible for answering the main question. So one of the big questions, what just happened, right? And to answer this, you can look at a lot of different techniques or technologies to be able to try to figure out, depending on the specialty of the person. And usually inside of a security operations center, there are people that have different specialties to try to address individual cases that come in. So EDR stands for endpoint detection and response, and we've done a video on that as well. And AV, I believe, is antivirus. So the EDR could alert that there are different attempts made to monitor the keystrokes of a user, and that's something that would be a specific technique that was used. And so how do you respond to that? A network tap alert provides alerts for anomalous network activity. For example, there could be an alert that a host is scanning other hosts in your network. That's a big deal. SIM alert. So security information and event management, we've done multiple videos on this as well, which is a software essentially that does analysis of a bunch of different logs that are being housed in one software. So it condenses and combines a bunch of different logs, and it goes through all of those logs at the same time. When that happens, an impossible travel rule, for example, when a user's account is being logged in from 2 different countries simultaneously. So it's like, it can't possibly be that this person is right now exactly is in the United States and they're also in Mexico or whatever. So when that happens, that's an alert that comes in from the SIM. So when the alert is created, there's a lot of information that comes through any of the softwares that you're using. And the first step is to investigate the info to make sure that it's not a false positive, to understand what's actually going on, who's being targeted, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of information that's attached to these alerts. For example, like the geolocation or the last time that it was logged in, the user's account that's being used, the history of their logons. There's a lot of information that's attached to a particular incident or an alert. And sometimes the information isn't enough, and we have to gather more information and actually go into investigation mode. And that's very, very important. And that specific process is called digital forensics. And this is another part of the incident response cycle. So there's digital forensics, incident response. DFIR is a whole other world as well. And so somebody who's on the digital forensics team, they're mostly going to be doing investigations. So hands-on investigations, as you can see right here. And that could be recovering the hard disk from the infected host to see how malware got in there in the first place, recovering the data from volatile memory, so the computer RAM, which is the memory that gets wiped typically if you turn off the computer, so you got to recover it really quickly. It's more important to get the RAM memory than it is to get the hard disk memory, believe it or not. And then recovering the system and network logs from a lot of different devices to uncover how the malware was spread within the network. So the overall goal here is to try to understand the scope of the incident, what was used, what different assets were attacked, and if you don't understand that scope, the process can't go further to take the rest of the steps that it needs to. So that's where incident response mostly excels, where it covers, right? Both of the extremes are obviously damaging, and if we misunderstand the scope to be larger than what it is, then we could authorize more drastic action than required, and that could be the intention of the attacker. They may want to psych you out and make you think like it's much bigger than it actually is, so that they distract you and you use a lot of your resources to handle this one thing, and as they've created that diversion, they could be attacking some other resource. If you misunderstand it to be smaller than what it is, then you don't take enough action, and now they really go and cause some serious damage. So that's a really big deal. The first attack might seem like it's really large, and you respond as if it's really large, and the next attack you're like, oh, it's probably not that bad, and you don't respond as if it's really bad, and then now they got you. Incident management covers the process of dealing with the incident. This is the portion, that's responsible for answering the primary question, which is how do we respond to what just happened to us? So triaging the incident and accurately updating the severity of the incident as new info is available, and getting more stakeholders involved, more different teams of the company involved to help with the incident, and such things as subject matter experts, guiding the incident action through the use of playbooks, deciding which containment, eradication, and recovery actions that need to be taken to deal with the incident, deciding the communication that will be sent internally and externally while the team deals with that incident, documenting the information about the incident, such as the actions taken and the effect that they had on the dealing with the incident, and closing the incident and taking information to learn from the incident to add to your lessons learned document and improve future processes, meaning improve your playbooks, right? So every time that something happens, you got to document everything extremely well so that you can add it to your playbooks and your lessons learned, so that in the future, if it happens again, you know exactly how to deal with it. This is very, very important, right? So it's a lot of times mistaken that only technical skills are required to deal with these things, and management of an incident is just as important as the technical skills to respond to the incident. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit. So levels of incident response and management. This is what I was talking about earlier. So a user has reported a phishing email, for example, in this case. So I'm really just going to skip this because it's not that big of a deal. They're just saying just not all alerts as not alert. Just like not all alerts are equal, all incidents are also not equal. That's basically what this entire paragraph is saying. So as we have different types of alerts, we also have different types of incidents, and this is particularly going to be demonstrated for this one example. So we have a phishing email that has been reported, and so a level 1 would be a SOC incident, a Security Operations Center incident. They're not even classified as incidents because they're usually just a purely technical thing. Upon investigation of the example, the analyst finds that it's an isolated event and therefore simply updates the mail filtering rule to block the sender. And these levels of can happen several times a day and are usually quick to deal with, and the analyst deals with it themselves, so that whoever caught it, they handle it themselves. So in this example, a computer emergency readiness team, so a CERT team, may be invoked at the investigation, found that several users received the email, which takes us to a level 2 incident, which is the computer emergency readiness team incident, so a CERT team. At level 2, several analysts may be involved. A CERT incident is one where we don't have enough to raise the alarm bells, but we're still concerned that there could be additional investigation needs to be done to determine the scope of what just happened to us. And usually the analyst would request assistance and more people from the SOC team would get involved. In this example, we would be investigating if any of those users interacted with the email. So if they clicked on something, if they downloaded something, and we need to understand what the actual download does, if it's a Trojan, if it's a worm, all that stuff. So if we were to stop the incident before any users interacted with the email, we can usually stop at this level. But if we find out that they contain malware and somebody clicked on it, or a few people clicked on it, then we have to go to the CSIRT team, which is the Computer Security Incident Response team, which is a level 3. So it gets more severe. As we go on, it just gets more and more severe. So at level 3, the entire Security Operations Center is placed on high alert and actively working to resolve the incident. At this point, the entire SOC team will focus on the single incident to deal with it. Analysts and the forensic team work to uncover the full scope of the incident, and the management team is taking action against the threat actor to contain the spread of the malware, eradicate it from hosts where it is discovered, and recover affected systems. If the team is able to stop the spread of the attack before any disruptions can occur, or the threat actor can escalate their privileges within the estate, the CSIRT team will close the incident. However, if it's determined that the scope is large enough through investigation, then we would take this to the crisis management team, which is the highest level, the CMT team. And crisis management is a big one. So at level 4, all hands on deck. Everybody is trying to figure this out because it's a full-scale cyber crisis. The CMT would usually consist of several key business stakeholders, such as the entire executive suite, members from the legal and communications teams, as well as other external parties, such as the regulator or police. Furthermore, at this level, we start to move into the territory of what is called nuclear actions, rather than simple actions to contain, eradicate, and recover. And this team can authorize the use of nuclear actions, such as taking the entire organization offline to limit the damage. So very, very, very important. And you notice, this one, a single person can handle it. This one, it's a couple of people handling it, and they maybe notified the management. This one, management is helping a few different people. The entire SOC, the entire Security Operations Center is on high alert and everybody's taking care of it. This one, the entire company is on high alert and everybody's coming in to try to figure out what just happened. And if necessary, they're going to shut down the entire network just to make sure no bad damage is done. And that in its entirety, like that by itself, having to shut down the entire network can do a lot of damage to a company because it's stopping business from running. So the benefits of incident response and management, if you haven't already figured it out, is that it's very difficult. Obviously, it's not cheap to do something like this. It's also difficult to tangibly explain to a business why they need something like this. But the cost of an incident can be very, very heavy. So it's not just a big company problem, just to kind of put it into perspective. According to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, only 60% of small companies that have suffered a cyber attack close their business after 6 months. Roughly 60% of small companies that have suffered a cyber attack close their business after 6 months. They shut down, they go out of business after 6 months. You got to understand how big of a deal that is. So obviously it's important to have an incident response and an incident management team, a security operations center. It's like very, very important because it could save you from going out of business. It's pretty crazy. So the first question right here is, at what level of an incident would the SOC, the entire SOC, be placed at high alert, which was level 3? At what level of an incident would be classified as a cyber crisis, which was level 4, the highest level that we have to deal with? And which component, incident response or incident management, is responsible for trying to answer the question, how do we respond to what just happened? And that would be incident management. And which component is responsible for answering the question, what happened? And that is incident response. So we are now, we should have a good understanding of what incident response and management is. So we're now going to talk about the different roles of this, and we actually have a site that we can also interact with as we go further down this path. So the first role in a SOC team or an incident response team is the SOC analyst. And the SOC analyst is essentially a single person. So you're going to become a SOC analyst. It's a single person sitting in front of a computer, responding to alerts and events that happen in the security operations center. And there's different levels of this. So you can have a level 1 analyst, a level 2, level 3, etc. And usually the person, or more often than not actually, the SOC analyst is the first person. It's the foot on the pavement, or the feet on the street, as they say. It's the people who see the incident first. They see the alert first. And then they're the ones that determine whether or not they can handle it by themselves, or they need to bring the SOC lead, which is the immediate supervisor. And the SOC lead, or the SOC manager, the head of the SOC, is responsible for dividing the tasks in the SOC and deciding to escalate an alert to the level of an incident. And usually the SOC manager understands the technical information required to perform an investigation to better help divide the different tasks during an incident. And usually this person sees everything that everybody on the team sees, and they only step in when something is pretty serious. More often than not, the analyst should be able to take care of it, and the lead is just overseeing what's going on. So if you can imagine that this person has one screen in front of them, this person probably has 20 screens in front of them, depending on the size of the team. Then you have the forensic analyst, which is the person that performs an investigation to better understand what happened. So this is the digital forensics team. This is the person that comes in to do the investigation. And digital forensics that must be investigated by reviewing artifacts such as the memory or the hard drive of a device. And then you have a malware analyst, somebody who's actually very good at code and understanding how malware works. And these guys often have significant technical capabilities to debug and decompile malware to understand how it works. And they often help to uncover indicators of compromise, IOCs, that are signatures of the malware that can be used to identify the malware in the environment. And then we have the threat hunter. This sounds just like a very cool title. A threat hunter is a person that actively tries to uncover new threats in the environment. The goal of threat hunting is to try and create new alert rules based on information available in the logs and other sources. By performing threat hunting, an alert would be generated that could help the team discover an attacker that attempted to use the same technique. And then we have the first responder. So the first responder, this is not necessarily not the SOC analyst, because the SOC analyst is truly the first person that gets to see the alert and the incident. The first responder is somebody who is responding first to something that has gone from an alert to an incident. A lead could technically be a first responder. The forensic analyst could be a first responder. So in certain cases, it isn't actually the SOC that is the first alerted to an incident. Often a cyber incident could have started a business as a business incident, For example, a product team discovers that their application has slowed down and isn't responding as it should. In these cases, the team becomes the first responder to the incident. While they will not be expected to deal with the entire incident by themselves, there are some key steps that the first responders should take to ensure that they don't compromise information that will be required to better understand the cyber incident. So it could be the people that are actually literally working inside the company and they're not even in the security operations center. Those people could also be the first responder. You have the security engineer. So this is the path that we're on, the security engineer path. They're not directly involved with the security operations center, because security operations center is more of the defensive, the analyst part of the center, but they can be involved in the incident. Security engineers are responsible for security of the division, application, or system. In the event that there is an incident in their area, they will often be relied upon as a subject matter expert to aid in the investigation, and they will often work closely with the SOC to ensure that the SOC is receiving log information from their division. And then this is where we get into the upper management. So you have the ISO, the Information Security Officer. The ISO is responsible for the security of the division. This is usually more management focused than technical, such as security engineers. ISOs are often involved in incident as subject matter experts and responsible for acting as the bridge between the IR team and their division, that the team will have to implement the actions provided by the incident response manager. Let me figure that out. I just zoomed out too much. Let's go fix that again. And then we have the incident manager, which is the person that was trained in performing the management duties for incident response and management. Incident managers have to be exceptional in note-taking and organized to ensure that everything during an incident is properly documented, that the processes are followed. Then we have the project owner. A product owner is usually the person that takes lead during the development of a solution. In the past, with the waterfall method, if you saw what we were talking about with the secure software development lifecycle, we talked about the waterfall method and the agile method and ultimately the DevSecOps method. In the past, with the waterfall method, products were only released after they were fully completed. However, today, using agile processes or also DevSecOps, products are released and continuously updated. As such, since a version of the project is already live, as a team is still performing development, incidents can already occur. In the event of an incident, the product owner is often called in as the subject matter expert to help with the investigation. And then subject matter expert, this one is kind of a gimme, so you should understand what that actually means. Active Directory could be a subject matter, and then there could be the Active Directory manager that would be the expert for that. The domain admin is technically a subject matter expert, and there's a lot of different things. I mean, there's so many different portions of a business that the head manager of that specific department would end up being the subject matter expert. Then you have the crisis manager, which is the lead for the crisis management team. It's usually the executive, such as the chief information officer or the chief operations officer, and they're responsible for ensuring that the crisis management team functions as they should and deal with the crisis. And the executive would be anybody like the chief marketing, the CEO, the COO, the CIO, CTO, chief technology officer, and the chief information security officer, the CISO. So these are the various members of a incident response. So we're going to go through the actual view site thing, which apparently we're just going to be matching the title with the various people. So let's see what we can do here. So this person investigates alerts in the SIM to determine if these events are true positives and an incident should be raised. We're going to say that this is the SOC analyst. Can be a member of the crisis management team and responsible for making difficult decisions during the incident. And we can say that this would be, okay, so it's the executive. That was very odd. The team that is called upon if the incident is sufficiently serious that there may be significant business impact. I would say that is the crisis management team. The team that is called upon if the incident is sufficiently serious that a full investigation is required. That would be the security. I need to bring that down here, right there. So CSERT. And then what's the next person? The person that first discovered the incident and has to follow a specific process. That would be the first responder. Let's see if we can scroll down like that. And then someone that has expert knowledge on a specific field. So that's definitely the subject matter expert, and so we can do that. The business owner of a specific application or a service, that would be the product owner in this particular case. And then we are only left with one person at the end. So the person that performs a detailed investigation is our forensic analyst. It could be the digital forensics analyst or the forensic investigator. And that is what we got. So here is our flag. We're just going to copy the flag and paste it here. And we are good with this one. So let's now move on to the second piece, which is the process of incident management. All right, incident management has a process, believe it or not. Usually people or organizations cover their own, but there is a lot of different frameworks or templates, I guess we can call them. And one of the biggest one is the NIST incident management process, which is the National Institute for Standards of Technology, Standards and Technology, I guess. And this is their incident handling guide. This is a giant document, or relatively, it's 79 pages. And it's something that you can get for free. NIST has them. There's a lot of different organizations that have them. I actually went through a Google cybersecurity certification, and they provided documents for every single country. So various countries have them. Actually, here, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. All right, so here's our document, and then if we go to the countries down here, so this is what we got, right? So we got the UK National Cybersecurity Center Incident Management. Then we have the Australian government, the Japan government, the Canada playbook, the Scottish playbook, and I think, is there another one? I think that's the only one that these are the only ones that I saved. But there's a lot. I mean, there's literally so much stuff for each country that is available that you can go and check it out. And this is just a sampling. I think these are like the biggest or the most commonly used. But of course, Russia will have one, China will have one, although I don't know if China will publicize theirs. But the incident management process is something that probably the company that you work with or the entity that you work with will customize. They'll go based on these frameworks, and then they'll customize it according to their own, because it's also industry specific. And depending on the type of environment that you have, if it's a mainly physical or mainly digital, a lot of these things is going to be specific to the company and the organization that you're in. So preparation is the first one, detection and analysis is the second one, containment, eradication, and recovery would be the third, post-incident activity, and then that goes back into preparation. So post-incident activity updates the playbook, and the preparation is a part of the playbook. When you have a really good playbook, that means that you are prepared. When you rehearse the steps of the playbook, that means you're prepared. And then you have a good intrusion detection system. You have a really good SIM or a really good team that's on top of everything that's going on. And then when they immediately notice that something has happened, they contain the incident so that it doesn't spread through your network. They eradicate the person that might be logged in remotely, or the malware that may have been downloaded. They recover any systems that may have been affected or any data that was lost, and then they detect again to make sure that everything's all good now. And once it's all good, then you go into post-incident, where you document everything that just happened, what you did to contain, eradicate, and recover. And then from there, you can go back into preparation and making sure that people are on top of their game, go back into detection and analysis, so on and so forth. So that, I think that by itself is really good. So I'm not gonna really read through all of these things, but these are just some key bullet points that need to be done, which is identifying and documenting key stakeholders and call trees that will be used during an incident. So who are you gonna call? Who are you gonna tell? Ghostbusters, create and update playbooks that aid the team in following a set process for incidents with a known nature. So things that you already know how to respond to, this is exactly what you're going to do as soon as that happens. If it's a 0-day type of an incident that you've never dealt with before, you need to know what's going on in that situation. Exercise the team's ability to deal with an incident through tabletop exercises and cyber war games. This is basically rehearsing. And then continuously perform threat hunting to help create new alert rules based on modern attacker techniques. Then you have detection and analysis. And this is something that is done through your antivirus software, through your endpoint detection and response software, through your SIM software. All of these different intrusion detection system, intrusion protection system, all of the different softwares and platforms that you have to help you in detecting something, and ideally they'll help analyze for you as well. Like Splunk does a good analysis of something as it does the detection, and then you do a forensic investigation of the artifacts both on the systems and of the network, and analyze the malware that is discovered to better understand how it works and create new signatures that can be used to identify it in the future so that you know exactly how to respond to it, so on and so forth. Then you have containment, eradication, and recovery. Containment means stop the bleeding, right? To contain it, stop it from spreading. Eradication means delete the damn thing and get it out of your network, get it out of the system. Recover means get the thing back to working order or back to the state that it was before the attack happened, so that you can progress business as usual. The reason why these things are split into 3 phases is because the order matters. Obviously, first you contain, and so one of the big things, like one of the really big rules for containment is if you find out that a computer has been infected, you unplug the computer from the Wi-Fi, or you turn off Wi-Fi, you unplug it from the network. You literally stop it from spreading across the rest of the network. You contain it inside of that one device. This would be the same thing as putting somebody in quarantine. If somebody was sick and you found out that they're sick, you put them in quarantine. You don't let them leave the room until you know exactly what you're dealing with and how to proceed, right? And then once you've contained it, so it's in that one device, you eradicate it from that one device. You wipe the device. Or if you know exactly what the specific thing was, in my opinion, like the safest way is to just wipe the damn thing and then, do a backup so that you can just reinstall everything that was on there based on a backup, so you can be guaranteed that the thing is no longer there. So we finally have the post-incident activity, which basically update your playbook. We want to evaluate what happened during the incident and have lessons learned and improve how we deal with these things in the future. So when you learn from the incidents to prepare yourself, that's what you do in post-incident activity. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to open the new site and we're going to go through this particular situation. So this essentially is to go and in order, right? So welcome to Incident Management Lifecycle. You are stepping into the role of the engineer, and you just want to put these things in the correct order. So first is preparation, and then you have detection, and then you have analysis and triaging. And now that you've analyzed and what's going on, the first thing is to what? Contain it. And then once you've contained it, you eradicate what just happened. You recover the system or the network, and then finally post-incident activity. That was an easy one, and we can now move on to our final piece, which is the common pitfalls during an incident. All right, one of the big things that's a common pitfall or a common mistake is insufficient hardening. And hardening is when you secure a system or you secure a network, you harden the network. So organizations usually need to prioritize speed and profits over security. They don't need to, but they do that. They typically prioritize speed and profits over security. So when that happens, security ends up being an inconvenience or a hindrance for an organization. But as we discussed earlier, 60% of businesses, especially small businesses, and a small business, so check this out, right? What is considered a small business in the US? And this will blow your mind. So A small business is a company that has 500 or fewer employees. So if you have 500 employees, you are considered to be a small business. And that's insane when you think about it. $5 million or less is one of the things that is also measured to see what is a small business. The last number that I saw, this is it. This is what the one that it was. It defines small business by firm revenue ranging from 1 million to over 40 million, and from 100 employees to over 1,500 employees. This is insane. This was what happened in 2021. So I guess they've kind of updated that, because these numbers right here are based on 2024. And this is NerdWallet versus what the census.gov. So I would go over the census.gov definition. I would choose that versus the NerdWallet definition. So it could be a business that does $40 million a year, and that's considered a small business. And based on the statistics that we found earlier, 60% of those businesses go out of business 6 months after being hacked, simply because of the fact that they didn't take the time to set up the teams or the infrastructure so that it's secure, and securing their infrastructure and prevent themselves from going out of fucking business. That's insane when you think about it. So once the solution has been deployed, the organization simply moves on to the next one. However, in security engineering, there's an important step called hardening, and this is being proactive. So once the solution is deployed, there may still be some configurations that didn't adhere to security best practices, but were performed to get the solution up and running faster. And the hardening process reverses these configurations to bring them back in line with security best practices. In the event that this is skipped, the likelihood of incidents is increased. Therefore, the business is now more vulnerable, and it can increase the amount of incidents, the volume of incidents that happen, and most of those things can actually be stopped, but it's still literally, it's such a slippery slope. It's one thing, just one successful incident can put you out of business. That's crazy when you think about it. So the hardening step should not be skipped. To make it easier, organizations have started to perform hardening during the development rather than simply at the end. This is the shift left principle that we went through, the secure SDLC, and this is also already done. So this video is already on our channel, the secure software development lifecycle, and this is the shift left principle. It's based on a graph. I'm not going to go through it right now. Go refer to that video just so you can understand what shifting left means. And I think there's actually a timestamp in the video that goes to shifting left. So you could, if you wanted to, you could just skip to that portion. Then we have insufficient logging. So logs, they're not fun. They're not exciting to talk about, but they can save you. They can save your business from going out of business. The first to have received the relevant information ends up being in a log, and the blue team is the person that is alerted to it. If there are not adequate logging that's happening, it can be considered as flying blind. So you don't know what's actually going on because you don't have the logs to it. So the blue team doesn't even know that something is happening, therefore they don't know what to respond to. So a common problem is the cost of ingesting log information, and therefore SIM is the tool that comes in that charges clients based on the amount of throughput data. This then results in organizations limiting the amount of logs that they're being ingested, because the SIM, if you go over 10 gigabytes, it'll charge you a different, and that's just an example. If you go over 10 gigabytes, it'll charge you at a different tier. If you go over 100 gigabytes, it'll charge you at a different tier. So that is what that they mean based on the amount of throughput of data. And so in order for the organization to save money, they stop ingesting as many logs. Therefore, their cost is lower, right? So if I choose less amount of logs to ingest inside of my SIM, then the amount of data that's being ingested is less, therefore my costs are less. So they do it to save cost. But obviously, if somebody is really smart, they'll go and attack you on some kind of really like not remote, but like I'm forgetting the word here, but this kind of abstract, let's say. They attack you from a place that you're not looking at commonly, and therefore they get past your SIM because they know that you're cheap, right? And you want to save money, which is crazy to think about. So if there is not enough logging, They can only be detected after there's an impact, when you're already in your digital forensics and response, and you're trying to figure out what just happened to you. And you can't prevent it, the damage is already done, so on and so forth. Then there is insufficient alerting or over alerting. So if you don't get enough alerts, that's a big problem because you don't know what's happening. Over alerting is also a big problem because now you think everything is wrong and there's too many things to respond to, and so now you're wasting resources. That's basically all you need to know in this particular case. Insufficient determination of the incident scope. So this is a big one because you don't understand what is actually happening across your network. You don't know who is being affected or what is being affected and how bad the effect is. So if you don't know who's being affected, or you miss a computer that was affected that was very, very important, or you miss something that happened to you that was very minute but it's still in your system now, all of those things is the determination of the incident scope. A scope could be the number of devices that were affected inside of the network, or it could be the type of attacks that were used against your network. So when you think about those two things, if you're not determining, or if you're insufficiently determining what's happening, then that's a really, really big deal, and it can cause a lot of damage, right? So insufficient accountability is also something that falls under this category, and this is kind of that Spider-Man meme where there's like three Spider-Men pointing to each other, where it's like, no, it was you, no, it was you, and nobody wants to nobody wants to take blame, nobody wants to be accountable for what just happened. So there's containment, eradication, and recovery actions. And during these incidents, actions can be discussed, but not where one person is going to be made responsible for doing all of the actions. So this often leads to growing as everyone thinks something has already been performed, which in fact it has not been performed, because there was not one specific person that was dedicated to doing that action, or everybody assumed that the other person was doing it, and then nobody ended up doing it. So that's a big deal. Then you have insufficient backups. This one's kind of, this is a given, and this is super, super easy to understand. If you don't have a backup that happens regular, so daily, you can say daily backups are important. For a company like Microsoft, they probably do hourly backups. It's like backups are so important. And I worked for a guy who didn't have any backups, and he'd been in business for a very, very long time, and one of his computers crashed, his main computer crashed, and he lost everything. And to get that business back up and running was such a pain in the ass, and obviously the guy didn't want to take responsibility for it, so he put all the pressure on his general manager, and the general manager was super fucking stressed. So this is one of those things that could so easily be avoided if you just spend a little bit of extra money and set up what you need to set up, and have the hard drives and the storage set up to just back up the stuff that you need to back up, at the very least to keep you functional. Maybe you don't want to back up everything because it takes too much space, but you need to back up something where it is functional at the very least. And then sometimes the backup is not sufficiently isolated, meaning since you want it to be available quickly, you don't isolate the actual backup, or you don't put it inside of a safe. So, you take the backup, you put it on an external hard drive. The external hard drive is still connected to the computer, or the external hard drive is just sitting on your table. And if it's a high availability disaster recovery type of an environment, or it's basically a disaster type of an environment, now your hard drive is at risk, and now you lose your backup. It's insane to think about, but that actually really does happen. So this is one of those big things that you need to understand as well. So let's go into our final piece right here, which is the introduction to incident response and management challenge, the third one. So the mission is to survive for 1 intense minute. The strategy is to duck or jump by holding up or down key. Oh, this is an actual game. It's going to be nice. So duck or jump by holding the up or down key. Obstacles, avoid them, obviously. Clues for high scores. Time is ticking. Make sure that your score is positive to get the flag. This is exciting. I'm excited about this. I am super excited about this. So let's see what we can do here. Start the game. All right, this is going to be it. So no hardening is a bad thing. Training the SOC is a good thing. Logs were not kept is a bad thing. Jump over that. Threat hunting is a good thing. Alert not created is a bad thing. Determine the scope is a good thing. Scope misunderstood is a bad thing. Respond to alerts is a good thing. Refine logging is a good thing. Document later is not a good thing. No backups is not a good thing. This is such a it's so bad at responding, like it doesn't immediately jump. So I don't know exactly. Action everything is probably not a good thing. Update plans is a good thing. Log everything is not a good thing, as we established. What else do we got? Run tabletops, definitely a good thing. Document actively is a good thing. Log what is required is a good thing. What else do we got? What else do we got? Oh, that's the whole thing. We passed. Score of 1,000. That's right, motherfucker. What's up? Yeah. Cool. And that is it for our video today. Boom and boom. Complete. Super excited about this one. So hopefully you learned the basics of incident response and why it's important to understand the different roles during an incident response, or the different roles for the incident response team, the difference between response and management, the process of incident management itself, and then of course the common pitfalls during an incident that causes a lot of bad damage to happen to a company. If you got any value from this, I would very much encourage you to join our community. So like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and drop a comment. Our comment section is banging. Let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the comment section, and it would be very, very awesome to hear from you as well in the comment section. And this is a new one that I gotta respond to. So I respond to all the comments that come in, and I think it's very, very important to keep active with the community, and I would very much love to see you inside our community, and to have you be a part of this really awesome environment that we're growing. So like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and drop a comment as well, just so I can hear from you, and just say hi, what's up. If you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. And if no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will see you in the next video later. This is the absolute best way to catch and expose culprits and attackers. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the logging for accountability. In the concept of incident response and incident management. Logging is a very, very big deal, as we've already established, and so is accountability. So just knowing what this actually means and where it fits in is the whole idea behind the video today. And it's, I think, going to be mostly read stuff, where we're just going to read through concepts and different types of course materials, but it's something that's very important for you to understand. Mainly because of the fact that, it's one of those things that is kind of boring to talk about, but it's super important when it comes down to incident response and incident management. So the introduction here says that logging is used to provide a source of truth for activity that occurs on a network. It's most commonly used, but not limited to, incident response and security monitoring. During the incident response process, a user may be held accountable for an action or behavior, and logging plays a crucial role in providing a user's actions or improving a user's actions. Accountability is the final pillar of identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. The IAAA model, this is a part of identity and access management, and it's used to protect and maintain confidentiality, integrity, availability, all that good stuff. So it holds users and peers on a network responsible for their actions, and logging is how you can backtrack that and actually audit that entire process to make sure that you actually can hold somebody responsible. So to ensure the efficacy of accountability, logs and other data sources must be protected, and they should be authentic, obviously, meaning they should actually be real. They shouldn't be fake. They shouldn't be manufactured or fabricated, right? And if you can't prove that a log was kept in its original state, it loses its integrity, which, going back to the confidentiality integrity part, for accountability and the incident response process. And you can't really rely on whether or not it's good. And in a lot of cases, good attackers will erase their tracks from the logs, so you don't see that they were in your system or in your network. So the best hackers actually do that. The objectives are understand where the data originates, how it's stored, and how a security engineer can leverage it, understand why accountability is important to security, and how logging can help improve the efficacy, apply logs and other data sources to incident response, and the principle of accountability. And before beginning this room, we need to understand logs, which I should have already done, I think, and we've already done Splunk basics. Actually, I haven't done understanding logs, but I mean, we can do this later. It's not that big of a deal. Intro to logs, I don't think should be something that you would need to see a video on, although because I haven't done it, I'm gonna end up doing a video on this anyways. But it's one of those things that you should understand so far, or you should have like a basic understanding of what a log is. Splunk basics, we've already done a video on this for sure, because we have all the green check marks right here. So I know that for a fact that I've done this, and I know I just did a series on Splunks. So you can definitely go check out the series on Splunk if you haven't watched those videos yet. And yeah, those are our prerequisites for what we're going to be talking about today. And at the very end of this, we actually have a machine that we're going to be working with. So that should be pretty fun too. All right, let's move into the importance of logging and data aggregation. All right, so logging aids any member involved in the incident response process depending on the source. It can provide different benefits or visibility into a network or device. Some examples could be if files were created, if emails were sent, any other technique or procedure that's been outlined by the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which if you've never checked out, this is like a very, very cool resource. And for every tactic or technique, so for example, for this attack vector of privilege escalation, there is 5 different processes for access token manipulation, and then it gives you the procedure examples and the different groups that use them, or the different attacks that use this particular technique in there. And then you can literally go through this whole thing, and there's just so much resource available that outlines exactly what they did. So very, very cool resource. If you've never checked it out, check out the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So because logs play an important role in incident response, they have to be authentic, and when they're analyzed, they need to be identical to the time that they were produced. And adding accountability to the incident response process, when logs are guaranteed to be authentic, a user can be held accountable for their actions because the log actually says what they did. This use of accountability is more formally known as non-repudiation and contributes to many threat models like the STRIDE model. Non-repudiation means that you can't debate it, you can't argue it, you can't combat it, you can't repudiate because the log says this is exactly what you did. And so non-repudiation means that an individual cannot contest an action, basically what I just said, the opposite of a repudiation. So this is where a SIM comes in, a security information and event management tool. This is a tool that collects, indexes, and searches through data from various endpoints and network locations. And we're not going to be covering, the in-depth of it, but we need to understand this is basically the tool that we're going to be using. And the tool that we're using in this particular case is ELK for Elastic Stack, and I think Kibana is it's like an open source version of a SIM, and it's super cool. I've done a couple of videos on Elastic Stack and ELK and Kibana as well, so you can go check those out on the channel. But this is the overall tool. There's a lot of different versions. Google has Chronicle, IBM has I think QRadar belongs to IBM. Wazoo is another really, really good one, which is open source. ELK, Splunk, QRadar, etc., etc. So there's a lot. And this is actually covered in the auditing and monitoring video. So I've done a video on this where we talk about logs, log management on Linux, on Windows, monitoring, the basics of SIM, yada, yada, yada. So this is a big topic, and this is one of those major tools that as a security analyst, or incident responder, really, you're going to need to know how to use these things. So these are some of the basic key elements of any SIM, typically real-time log ingestion, alerting against abnormal activities, 24/7 monitoring and visibility, data insights and visualization. The dashboard is where this comes in. Ability to investigate past incidents. Really, really, really useful freaking tool. If you didn't have a SIM, you would have to go line by line through the log and read every single line. And believe me, that shit is not fun. Unless you're like Rain Man or something, that you just love ingesting data or something like that, it's not fun to read data line by line. So these tools make it very, very easy to kind of get everything in one place and try to figure out what's happening, simply because of the visual interface, really. But because of the fact that they actually ingest the logs and they process everything in real time, and then they give you some kind of a feedback for you to review. Very, very useful tools. So the question here is, a user being held accountable for their actions as proven by logs is known as what? I believe it's non-repudiation, right? Let's see if this is the actual answer. I think that's the answer that they're looking for. Let's see if that's actually it. Yep, that is it. Non-repudiation. Okay, cool. So let's go into log ingestion and storage. All right, as a kind of a 30,000 foot overview, this is not by any means meant to be a detailed review of this concept, but there's three components that a SIM uses to search, index, and load balance the logs. The components are the search header or the search head, the indexer, and the forwarder. And these things are named differently based on which SIM you actually use, but the concept is the same every single time. Since we're going to be talking about, or since our focus on this room is more on accountability, we're going to be talking about the indexer and how data arrives from a device to the indexer, which is also known as data ingestion. And there's the agent forwarder process. So the agent being the endpoint. So your computer would be the agent, and the data from your agent is going to forward to the SIM itself. So your data forwards, so you being the agent and your computer being the forwarder. Essentially, that's what that is. Port forwarding is another one where you just track the activity that's done on any given port. You have the syslog, which is the log for the system, and then you can just upload logs into it. So these are the various types of data ingestion. While there are several ways of ingesting data, there tend to be fewer ways to store the data, although the primary point of failure for accountability is ingestion. Storage can be equally challenging. And we talked about this in the last video, where a company may make a decision to not store everything that comes in from every single log, and because of that they leave themselves open to being attacked because somebody's using an uncommon log and that log was never stored or ingested because the company was trying to save money. So yeah, when dealing with storage concerns, it is often not attackers that we have to worry about, but technical faults. For example, an index is accidentally deleted or a storage device is corrupted. These are a few examples of things to consider while keeping this data authentic and secure is important for accountability. It often has overlapping themes with compliance. Compliance and regulations go hand in hand. One such regulation may be that the log data must be archived or stored for a certain amount of time. And this happens a lot. This is very, very big in the medical field or in banking. This plays into accountability again, where non-repudiation must be applied to a log source for compliance. For example, an audit requires the past 6 months of a log source. As a stakeholder, you have to guarantee that those log sources reflect the activity of the network and, they're not deleted. Like, you actually have those logs, right? So one solution to the storage problem is cold storage. And it's a process standard for storing data, which can be summarized as storing a large quantity of data optimally. Cold storage is rarely accessed and thus does not require high-performance storage devices. Examples of cold storage may be low-cost hard drives or even tape drives. Jeez, that's super old school. Hot storage is data accessed often and requires higher performance, which may consist of solid state drives, SSDs, and in some cases, high performance hard drives. There may be other levels of access and performance throughout the life cycle of data that can be referred to as warm storage. So it's not very frequently used, but you do use them. So it's not cold and it's not hot. It's lukewarm, right? The standard for how long data stays in each phase will depend on the regulatory requirement and company guidelines. So if you're in the medical field, for example, versus somebody who never accesses their data, for example, I don't know exactly what company that would be, but that's an example. The storage process may be data that is stored hot for 6 months, warm for 3 months, and cold for 3 years. And then after 3 years, you're no longer required to keep it and you can completely wipe it. That's an example of a cycle. PCI DSS is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, and it's one example of standard that requires audit logs to be stored for a year and kept immediately available for 90 days to remain compliant. So that's just one example. So here are some questions. What component of a SIM is responsible for searching the data? I'm going to venture a guess that it's the search head. Since it's searching data, that's probably it. Very good. How many years must all audit data be stored to be PCI DSS compliant? And it says 1 year, so 1. There we go. Very cool. Easy. This is like read only, and we're just getting an understanding of this. You can probably put this on like 1.5 times speed. Although I try to read really fast, so you may not understand me on 1.5 times speed or 2x speed, but yeah, it's going to be a pretty short video, I think. Okay, types of logs and data sources. So let's kind of breeze through this a little bit. All right, so here are the most common log sources and how they may be used in incident response. You have the manual log source, and it's any log that is manually written or composed by an author. So, for example, a change log. Automated log sources, any logs that are automatically generated by default. For example, a config log, a tool, something from a developer. This could be the syslog, it could be an application log. And then other logs that are categorized and often required by compliance could be an email log, messaging, or other communication, any of those things. These are just some examples of logs. There's so many logs. A good log source may not include only one log due to the nature of a network. It might require multiple logs. The network log, for example, I think it's called the connect log. It may require multiple logs, log types to create one quality log source. For example, firewall log, there you go, that's a big one. Firewall log, a system log used together to hold each other accountable. That is, the validity of one log can be proven using another, vice versa. A log source could also be collecting too much information. For example, several types of logs are collecting the same data or creating the same alerts, and it can increase noise, storage complexity, and other consequences. So you want to, I guess, keep maybe 2 of the same type, or maybe like they're complementary sources. They're like, adjacent to each other. They're not doing exactly the same type of logging. Yeah. A change log is an example of what log source. This is a manual log, and an application log is an example of what log source, and that would be an automated log. Very good, making good progress here. So using logs effectively. Let's talk about, this is a short one, so let's just read through this real quick. All right, there are many types of SIMs to choose from. Each feature and capability can impact how you can use your logs effectively. If you're not using a specific feature of a SIM, it doesn't signify that you're not effectively using logs, because log sources and usage requirements they vary, and it all depends on what you actually use and your usage requirements, storage requirements, all that stuff. So if you're only using logs as an incident response tool and not for real-time monitoring, you may not need or use the real-time feature of some SIMs. So very, very simple to understand. You're not live monitoring everything. You're just collecting all these things just in case something happens, and then you go back and you review what just happened, right? So as briefly introduced in task 4, using multiple log types and sources is beneficial for validating logs and creating a complete story. The concept is more formally known as correlation, or building a relationship between two things, the log and the data. For example, if a user has performed a suspicious action, so for example, creating a DLL file, apparently that's a really big deal. I didn't even realize that was such a big deal, but it's a dynamic link library file, and it's a library that contains code and data that can be used by more than one program at the same time. So for example, Windows OS, the COM-DLG32 DLL performs common dialog box related functions. Each program can use this functionality that is contained in this DLL to implement an open dialog box. It helps promote code reuse and efficient memory usage. Sounds boring as fuck to me, but it's important. You see what I'm saying? Like these are some of the things that are like, it sounds super boring unless you're actually a sysadmin or a system engineer or something like that, but it's really important and it triggers a flag. So if somebody performed a suspicious action, for example, creating a dynamic link library file, a browser application log could be used to correlate their browser search history with their behavior. If they were searching for a specific installer or troubleshooting process, it may explain the suspicious action. If email logs showed a potential phishing attempt directly followed by the suspicious action, it could cause more investigation. So data enrichment can also be included in correlation efforts. So correlation essentially means what do these various events have to do with each other? How do they connect? How do they correlate with each other? And so if somebody opens up a phishing attempt and then there's a suspicious action, so they open up the email, they click on the thing, and then after they clicked on the thing, this little worm got installed on their system, and that worm went from that computer to the next computer to the next computer. All of those events correlate with each other, and that's what's important to understand, and really what it means to use a log or logs effectively, because you're combining various logs from various sources. And this is why SIMs are so important, because for you to manually go through each one of those logs to try to figure out how things connect to each other, you would lose your fucking mind. So a SIM does all of that for you in the blink of an eye, and then it says, hey, this kind of seems like a suspicious chain of events, you should pay attention to this. So this is why we love SIMs. What is the process of using multiple log types and sources as part of an incident response, formally known as? And that is called correlation. All right, excellent. So moving on to our final task here, where we actually get to use our little tool, which is Splunk. We're going to end up using Splunk and go through some interesting exercises. So let's see how it goes. Okay, so we got our Splunk server to load. I actually did this entire exercise thinking that it was being recorded, but apparently my recording cut off at like 1 minute into it. This has been a very interesting day, or last couple of days, because I don't want to bore you with it, but it took some troubleshooting just to even be able to get the server up, and it took a couple of days. So anyways, the whole idea is to first make sure that you either connect via VPN to the Splunk, to the THM server, and load this virtual machine right here, or you can use the attack box. And what I had to do was I went through a different room that had the attack box button in it, and then I clicked open the attack box, and then when I came into this room, the attack box was open, and then I opened up the Firefox browser, and I went to the IP address that they gave me down here, the URL that they gave me, so I can load the Splunk server. So that is what I had to do to be able to make this happen, and hopefully I can actually complete this recording without Splunk crashing on me, or not Splunk, my stupid recording crashing on me and stopping my recording. That would be ideal in this particular case. But all of the answers are already here. So what I'm going to show you is how I got these answers. So that way you know how we got the results instead of me just giving you the results. But basically, the questions are: how many total events are indexed by Splunk? How many events were indexed from April 15th to the 16th? How many unique users appeared? How many events associated with the user James? What utility was used associated with James? and what is the event ID for the process creation event that James put into motion. So this is how we're going to use logging to keep James accountable. Essentially, that's the whole idea here. So that being said, let's actually jump into it, and I'm going to keep an eye out on my recording to make sure that my recording doesn't crash halfway or after the first minute, so we don't lose any of this stuff. So we have this loaded on the following screen. So it's already here, and let me just make sure that this is full screen for us. All right, so when you first load Splunk, this is the very first page that you get, and this is where you can either choose to add data or connect any kind of a application, and usually when you click on add data, it takes you through an entire wizard. There you go, that's the right word. It takes you through a wizard where it says, do you want to connect an endpoint to this? Do you want to watch a specific port? So on and so forth. Or do you want to upload a file? And in this particular case, there was a file that was uploaded. And they don't tell us any of this stuff. So we have to try to figure that out. And this is why they said it was important for you to go through the Splunk basics room before you get here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the basics, and then we're just going to go through just finding the answers to those questions. Very, very basic set of questions. So the first and the big thing that you want to do is you just want to click on search and reporting. And when you go through search and reporting, your search history will show you all of the previous searches that were ran. And I don't want to open it because these are all the searches that I just ran to find all the answers. So I don't want to kind of give it away. So the first thing that we want to do is we just want to find the specific file that we are going to be searching through. And the query that you use is index. So when you use index, you can do index equals asterisk. And when I click on that, that's going to show me everything, right? And in this particular case, it says 0 events because the time right here is just only showing the last 24 hours. So what I want to do is I want to drop that down and just click on all time instead of just the last 24 hours. And then now it's going to show me all of the events that are available here. And then we go down here and we look at the source. And the source is the actual file itself where all these events are coming from. So event equals logs.json is the actual source file, right? So what I can do now, I can modify my query here to index equals event logs, or I could just click on this and it'll bring everything up for me for that specific file. And now you look at index is equal to all these things, and then the source is event logs.json, right? So this is our updated query. And this is what's really nice about Splunk, is that any of these things that you click, it just updates your search query up here to whatever that thing is that you clicked on, so that you can learn how to build queries that way, as well as just navigate easily. So you don't have to actually type these things out. You could literally just click around. And I could click back and it'll go back to the previous query that says index equals asterisk, so on and so forth. And if I click forward, it'll go to the query that we were just at. So very, very simple to use. So now that we're inside of the right query, the total number of events is 12,256 events. So that's the answer to the first question here, which is what are the total number of events that were indexed by Splunk. Now the next one is how many events were indexed from April 15th to 16th. Very, very easy to do. You just click on this thing right here from all time, and you go from these preset parameters that are here, and you just go to date range, and then date range you go between, and then you just modify it to the dates that they want, which is, I believe, 04/15/2022 to 04, and let me do 04/16/2022. And just like that, we have the date range. We click apply, zoom back out, and it uploads everything for us, or it updates everything for us. And now we have a new number right here, which is 12,250. So instead of 56, we have 12,250. Really, really easy to do so far. So nothing crazy. So now it says how many unique users appear in the data set and how many events are associated with the user James. This is like, it's so awesome how easy and simple these things are to use. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to go to all these fields that are available on the side right here, and you want to click on user, and then it now shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, and you don't even need to click on it because it literally just says the number right next to it, which is 4. So 4 users are associated with this particular series of events, and then for the James person, you see that his count is 5, and so you just see that number as well. So super easy. But since we're going to be dealing with James, I'm actually going to click on James now so that my search query updates at the top right here. And now I'm only looking at events for James, the 5 events that are associated with James. And very easy, very simple to do so far. And then we have what utility was used in the oldest event associated with James, and then what event ID followed the process creation events. So that, and then this is a very interesting syntax and phrasing for this question. So what event ID followed process creation associated with James? So that's the thing, right? So there's what we're looking for in this case is the event that followed, that came after the process creation event, and that's the specific event that we're looking for. And this was a little thing that kind of tripped me up a little bit. So we are just going to look for the oldest event, the utility that was associated with the oldest event, and then the event ID. So since he only has 5 events, this is actually very easy to do. But the events are going to be in chronological order from the most recent to the oldest. So the one at the very top is the most recent, and the one at the very bottom is going to be the oldest. And then this also just looks the most sketch, like this is the most suspicious looking event right here because it has all of this freaking text block and like this random code that's in here. So this most likely is what we're going to be searching through. So what we're looking for is utilities that are going to be inside of this thing somewhere. So the easiest way to do this is literally click on the browser screen, do Control F, and depending on what you have, it's either Command F or Control F for find, and then you're just going to look for the word utility. And then when you type that, in my particular case, there's 2 matches that show up here. And so the first one doesn't really give me much, but the WMI command line is the actual name of the utility, but what they're looking for is the executable name. And then so if we just kind of follow this string along right here, you'll see that it's actually in this piece right here. And by the way, you can add any of these things to search right here, but I don't want to do that. But if I zoom in right here, this is kind of blocking my search right here. So if I do this and come right here, you see that WMIC.exe is the name of the actual executable. And then there's also, if I just click one more time, it'll take me to another one down here, WMI command line, and then I can just go for this as well, and it'll bring me again to the same result, which is WMIC.exe. So that's the executable that we are looking for, and that was the answer to this question. So what utility was used? It was WMI command line, WMIC command line. And finally, what event ID follows the process creation associated with James? And again, super easy to do. You just go up to all of these suggested fields that we have right here, or the interesting fields that we have right here. And what we're going to look for is event IDs. And so there's literally one called event ID. Super easy. So you click on that, and then now we have 2 events. That's it. And this is, again, super easy because it's so low in volume. There isn't much activity that's happening. In a lot of other cases, there's probably more activities and you have to do a deeper dive. So I would recommend you go through the Splunk videos that are on the channel so you can actually find those kind of like the deeper dive types of investigations that we did, because this one is super basic. So we have 2 events here. The first event, if we just click on it, it'll show us in the comments what this actually is, or in the message, excuse me. And in the message it says process create, right? So this is the first one, and it's process create. And if you remember, the question is kind of phrased interestingly, where it says what event ID followed process creation events, right? So that means what event ID came after the process creation events associated with James. And so since there's only 2 events, we can just deduce from process of elimination that the event ID that came after this one is event ID number 3, right? So super basic. And when you look at event ID number 3, so let's go back over here, and then where's the event ID button? Right here, event ID, and then we click on event ID number 3, and then this is the event ID that shows up right here. And actually, so let's make it a little bit easier even. So if I just click on event IDs, and let me see, there's only 2 values over here. It should actually only show right here. So since we're doing chronological order, right? So remember we said that it shows you the most recent at the top, and then it'll show you the older ones as you go down. So this is the most recent at the top, and the event ID is number 3 for this one. So this is the most recent. That means it came after everything else. And if I scroll down and find the other one, which is event ID number 1. So this one came first. So after this event came the very next event, which is the last event, which is event ID number 3. And that is how we find that. So there's a few different ways that you can break that down and try to find that. But that was it. That was literally it for this entire room. And very, very basic exercise, but now you kind of understand what Splunk looks like if you've never seen Splunk before. I do recommend that you go actually check out the Splunk videos that we have on the channel, so it can be a little bit more eye-opening of an experience, and you see more in-depth investigations just to make it more fun, and you can know how to mess around with those things. So that was it for this particular room for logging for accountability. Very, very straightforward, very easy to understand. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of it. If you did get value out of this room, I would highly encourage you to go ahead and like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and all that good stuff so you can join our community on this lovely, wonderful channel. There's been a lot of great stuff happening, and I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. There's currently 152 videos, not including the one that is being recorded right now. There's a lot of compilation videos, like long tutorials, longer than 5, 6, 7 hours. And we are, the community has been growing. So I'm very, very excited about it. It would be amazing to have you. I respond to all of the comments that come through our comment section, either if you're trying to just say hi, or if you actually have questions that you want answered, or if you just want to say thanks, any of those things. A lot of people just say thanks, or they leave some kind of a nice compliment, which is really cool. And then some people just ask a question, and if there's a question, I'll drop the answer for you as well. And then if it's like a really heavy duty question, then I'll go create a video in response to your comment, in response to your question. So it would be amazing to see you in our community, and it would be really nice to hear from you in the comment section. So make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff, share the video, and everything else, just so you show a little bit of love. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my entire plug for that. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will see you in the next video. Later. When disaster strikes and when it hits the fan, the first responder is the most notable person, the key person that will determine how a situation turns out. And a lot of times it's not even the person that's on the blue team or even in the security department in any way. And it's literally somebody that's in some random department that catches something or notices something. And how they respond to that situation is going to literally make or break the situation. And what we're going to be talking about today is becoming a first responder, training first responders, which is most likely what you're going to end up doing when you go into cybersecurity and become a security engineer. And it's a very important process. This is more an info type of a video where we're just going to be doing a lot of reading and kind of covering of concepts and training and stuff like that, but it's very important. This is an important topic, and the prerequisites for this particular room are the intro to incident response and management, logging for accountability and monitoring, which both of these videos should already actually be up on the channel, so you can go check those out. I think they're actually the last couple of videos that came out right before this video. And these are our learning objectives. What is a first responder? What are the tasks that have to be performed by the first responder? The importance of preserving evidence, processes required to ensure that the blue team can be successful or can successfully take over an incident. And I've already completed this because it's very, very simple room, very easy room, but I wanted you to have this information for your reference. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going through the becoming a first responder room inside of TryHackMe. So let's jump into preservation of evidence. Okay, in some kind of, or in any kind of a crime scene or an incident, I guess we can call it, evidence needs to be managed properly. And if it's physical evidence, usually if you've seen in movies, they'll put, red tape around something, or they'll put the do not cross tape. I'll show you right now. Evidence, crime scene, let's do that. You'll see something like this, right, wrapped around an environment, and maybe we can even see some kind of a scenario like this. This is probably a really good example of it. You'll see this type of an environment in a movie, and this is a physical crime scene, and they do this because they don't want the evidence to be tampered with, and they want to be able to get all of their investigators and their forensics team in here so that they can gather everything they need to gather before they turn it over and before they clean up the site and do what they need to do, so that whatever that location was, let's say this was a restaurant or something, the restaurant needs to go back to business as usual. But before any of that happens, the forensics team and the FBI and investigators, all those people need to get what they need from that situation. And in the context of cybercrime, one of the things that's really interesting to think about is volatility and the volatility of evidence, which means the liability to change rapidly, unpredictably, especially for the worse, and the tendency of a substance to evaporate at normal temperatures. These are both very applicable to cybersecurity, even though they're talking about the substance evaporating. We're going to be talking about evidence evaporating, like vanishing into the ether and disappearing. And this is a very, very sensitive time in incident response. And this is probably the most sensitive time in incident response, when something first happens and you need to immediately respond to it, which is why there's the first responder concept. And so the biggest mistake that is performed during incidents is shutting the host down. And this is wrong for two reasons. Number one, the significant amount of important evidence is found in volatile spaces that we'll talk about in a little bit. And that means that it's lost as soon as the device loses power. And the second one is it alerts the threat actor who might be on, who might think that we're on to them, and then they'll do something more disruptive, or they'll proceed to the next phase of their attack because, they were just trying to do reconnaissance, or they were just doing a little bit of research on your system, and now they found out that you're actually onto them, so now they're going to fast forward to the next step of their attack. And turning off the host could be the same as disabling network access on the host, meaning if you disconnected from Wi-Fi or disconnected from the internet, that could literally be set off alarms for the hacker as well, and they would still proceed to the next level of their attack. And this is actually something that a lot of people in IT and a lot of people in cybersecurity have actually talked about regularly. Whereas they'll tell you, yeah, the first thing you want to do is you want to disable it from the network. And it's actually, when I first read through this, I was like, that's kind of an interesting concept when they say if you disable it from the network, it actually warns the threat actor, or it kind of alerts them that we might be onto them. And you don't necessarily want to do that. And so that the situation will then be, okay, well, what do you do instead? If you don't want that to happen, but you still don't want them to get access to the rest of your network or to do a lot of things, what can you do then in that regard to actually protect yourself and prevent the attack from going further and further? So that's very, very important concept. And of course, we're going to be talking about that a little bit. The Internet Engineering Task Force created a document that is called Guidelines for Evidence Collection. And this is actually a really, really cool document. And this specific piece right here is actually covered in the CompTIA CYSA exam. So this is the order of importance when you're going through digital forensics to try to figure out or to try to pull information from a device. So the first one would be the registers and the cache. The last one would be archival media. And this is literally the order of importance, the order that you should take as you're going through retrieving media when you're doing digital forensics. And the reason why this is important, we'll talk about right now. So The first level is the registers and the cache. And these are extremely volatile and constantly changing, as there's different applications that get ran or different activities take place. And something as simple as literally copy pasting something can change the data that's inside the registers and the cache. So we would never be fast enough to capture this evidence at the exact moment that you become aware of it. You need to do it as soon as possible. And this is vital for malware analysis to understand what the malware performed on the host and what it does. And in most incidents, we could not capture this information immediately because it's just way too volatile. So as soon as humanly possible would be the best way to do it. If you can put some safeguards on the machine, that would be amazing. If you can train the staff who's dealing with computers to do something like that, that would be amazing. So this is all very, very important. It's usually, end up being like the branch manager. So if it's a bank, the tellers most likely aren't going to get trained to do this, but an immediate operations supervisor or the branch manager would be the one that would get trained in the blue team with the blue team, so that in case something happens at the branch level, the branch manager knows to step in and go ahead and at least copy the registers in the cache or take some kind of a snapshot from the machine so that you actually have that information. The next level would be the routing tables, the address resolution protocol cache, the process tables, the kernel statistics, and the memory. So something could have happened on a single host. You got to be aware that more hosts could have actually been infected. So you want to have a better understanding of not what just happened with that specific computer, but if it communicated to any other host in the network, what those other hosts were and what other devices were communicated with. So then you got to capture the routing and the ARP tables. ARP tables are the address resolution protocol, which essentially shows number one, who owns what IP address, but it also shows how many bounces something took, how many hops, I think is the specific term, how many hops something took to connect from one IP address to another IP address. And they have a specific time to live. It's called TTL, meaning if you're unable to capture this data in time, you may not have the full picture of what actually happened, and then you might lose it. The actual suspected host itself, regarding that particular computer, you want to better understand what applications were running and what they were doing at the time of the incident. So you have to capture information and processes that were executing at the time of the accident, and that's what the process table is. And finally, you have programs, the program name that doesn't tell you exactly what it is or what it's doing, especially when you can just easily change the program name. So the program name may have been changed intentionally to actually mislead you. So if you want to completely, fully understand what the program is, you got to collect it from the memory, which is considered to be the random access memory, the RAM. We're not talking about the hard drive. We're talking about the random access memory. And this is something that gets wiped when you turn the computer off. It resets the RAM. So the information located here can be lost if there's a brownout or if the power is turned off. And malware has become incredibly advanced and can stage its different payloads, meaning even if we have a sample of the malware to execute in the sandbox, we can't truly understand what it was doing on the host without actually analyzing it directly in the memory of the device, in the RAM. And then you have the temp files. So applications use temp files, create temp files all the time. For example, a web server, active sessions are usually stored in a temp file, and they're preserved longer on the actual computers, typically not on web servers, but you don't want to take any chances in actually losing those things for the investigation. And then you have the disk, which is the actual hard drive, the actual machine itself, which you can take a snapshot of it. They call it taking an image. The disk duplicator is a very, very basic one. It's a command line tool, and then there's a lot of different types of tools that you can use to take a snapshot of the disk, which basically means you're literally copying everything on that computer so you can transfer it onto a hard drive and use it in a sandbox, so you can do further investigation, and you can make copies of it so you don't tamper with the original copy, accidentally deleting something and doing something, clicking on something that may actually wipe the entire disk, because that's exactly what the hacker wanted, and they wanted to cover their trace, cover their steps, and so that way they designed something that if you clicked on it, it wipes the entire disk. So you take a copy of the disk, you duplicate that, and then you do your investigation on the duplicate copy so that you don't mess anything up accidentally. And then we have the remote logging and monitoring. So in the logging for accountability and monitoring room, we actually went through Splunk. We used a Splunk scenario where we actually backtracked and we tried to find what a specific user did. And logs are a very big part of that. So a host would forward their logs to a secure remote location. Typically, this is a part of the backup. And so even if the remote location doesn't have an infinite log retention policy, they still do this. And at this stage, we're not sure how far back the incident goes. So we want to make sure that we preserve these logs as far back as possible while the investigation is still ongoing. And then you have the physical configuration and the network topology, which at the time of an incident is not usually volatile, but this evidence can actually assist you in the investigation, and understanding and preserving this is a very important thing. For example, which subnet the host was connected to. And if you don't know subnetting, I would recommend you look into subnetting. It's kind of complicated at the beginning, but when you study it for a little while, or if you reread some of the articles or rewatch some of the videos, there's a lot of great videos on this. You kind of understand what it actually means, and it's very important. Subnetting is when you essentially break apart sections of a network. It's also called a network segmentation, so that one specific segment of the network operates by itself, and then you have another segment of the network. And if something happens in one of these segments or one of these subnets, it doesn't leak into the other ones, and it doesn't infect the other networks, the other subnets and the segments. So you want to make sure which subnet the original host was connected to, if it actually communicated around with the rest of the subnets. And when you understand the scope specifically means how wide, how many devices were affected in this particular context. That's what they're talking about. And then once you understand that, it kind of helps you get a bigger picture of what actually happened, and if you need to go look at any of the other hosts that need to be investigated. And finally, you have the archival media. So this is basically backups. It's not necessarily volatile, which means it doesn't necessarily just go poof and smoke, but it can actually be used as evidence to try to figure out how far back the incident went when comparing artifacts on the actual disk, and whether or not those artifacts can be found on backups. And usually they're not going anywhere, so you have you have a bit more breathing room to focus on the more volatile, for example, the temp file system or the routing table or the registers, so on and so forth. So the two really big don'ts that they mention to tell us is, don't trust the programs on the system. That means that you don't want to use the actual software on the host to perform your collection for a lot of different reasons, but one big reason is that the hacker could have actually altered that program, and when you try to use the program on the original system, you either are tainting the evidence or it just wipes the evidence. So for example, there's a thing called Velociraptor. There's a software called Velociraptor. There's another one called Redline. I did an entire series of videos on digital forensics and incident response. So you can go and check out all of those videos. And we used a lot of various tools for digital forensics and incident response. So for example, let's say there's a copy of Redline on the infected host, and you as the digital forensics analyst, you're going to go and run Redline to do your digital forensics on the machine, but the hacker knows that you're probably going to try to run Redline, so they're going to change that program. They're going to infect it with some kind of code that once you turn it on, it wipes the machine. And that's a big situation. That's like a big catastrophic kind of a situation. So you don't want that to happen to you. Another one is, don't run programs that modify access to times of files. This is also a really big deal. So when you copy paste something, it actually changes that file. Even if it's in a small capacity, you're not really even doing anything. You're just copy pasting something, but it changes the file specifically when it was accessed. So that date and timestamp on that file is now changed. and it could have been some like that specific timestamp would help you so much in your investigation, but now it's ruined. It's been changed and you no longer have that, and you can't use it anymore in trying to backtrack the steps of the attacker. A big concept in digital forensics is called chain of custody. And chain of custody is also done in regular forensics or regular investigations without any kind of cyber or IT involved. And it basically means who found the evidence, how did they handle it, who was the next person that handled it, what did they do with it, and all of these things needs to be documented so that you understand the chain of from when it was originally found to when it finally made it to the either the court proceeding or the official investigation with everybody, all the stakeholders involved and things like that. And in a lot of cases in digital forensics, we will take for example, when you take a disk image, right? So we talked about taking a disk image right here. When you take a disk image, you immediately want to get the hash value of that disk image that you took so that you put it on the chain of custody form, and at any point if that hash value changes throughout the chain of custody, we know that somebody tampered with that disk image. Something was done to that disk image that is no longer the original image that was found on the crime scene. So chain of custody is very, very important. And these are the things that just needs to be it needs to be taught to somebody. For example, the teams that would be the first responders, that you say, hey, listen, when something happens, don't do anything on the machine. Like, don't click on anything, don't open anything, don't run anything, leave it alone. If you suspect that something has happened, leave it alone. That's like if all else fails, if you do nothing else, just don't do anything. And don't touch anything, don't tamper with anything, because we don't want any of this to be altered by the time that the blue team actually gets to the site. So it's very, very important that the teams that are involved in this, like the actual man on the field kind of a thing, those people understand how important this is so that they don't accidentally do anything that ruins everything. So the question is, what priority order for preservation is given for the disk, which was the fourth? What priority order for preservation is the archival media, which was the last thing, number 7, is the register and cache, which was the very first thing. And the term that's used to describe ensuring that evidence can be used in legal proceedings is called the chain of custody. And just like that, we are now done with preservation of evidence. So let's talk about alerting the relevant stakeholders. All right, when an incident takes place, there is something that should be available to everybody, which is called the incident playbook. And inside of the incident playbook, there should be a breakdown of all the types of incidents that have happened and how they responded and the best ways to respond. And in case something does happen, here's what we want you to do, and here's what we think you should do to respond to it. So for example, if we're dealing with a phishing campaign, so you have a suspected email, you parse and evaluate the email. If there is a URL or an attachment, you would do something. If there is no URL or attachment, you would do something else. So if in this case, if there is no URL or attachment, you email and notify and thank whatever the user is, and then it ends. But if there is a URL or an attachment, then it's, okay, if it contains an attachment, get the hash value of it, send it to VirusTotal, and try to figure out whether or not it's malicious. If it contains an URL, do the same thing and try to figure out if it's malicious. And if it is, then you delete the email. If it's not, then you can go ahead and try to proceed accordingly. And if somebody opened the attachment and it ended up being a malicious attachment without going to VirusTotal to try to check the hash value of it, and we've done this in other videos as well, and you can easily try to figure out how to find the hash value of something. So that part of it is not that difficult. But once you have the hash value of something, if the people at the branch level, the people at the level where they're actually interacting with the email, if that person isn't aware that they should be checking the hash value of a file or the hash value of a domain name or a link that comes to see if it's actually malicious, if they don't know that, they'll accidentally click on it. And sometimes it's as simple as opening up a PDF file where the macros of the file have some kind of a code in it, meaning like basically the kind of stuff behind the scenes that nobody actually sees when you open a file. You open a file and you think you just opened some kind of a Word document, but behind the scenes, the code of that file and the macros, there was some kind of malicious payload in there, and you opened it, and now you've inflicted damage and inflicted chaos upon your device and your network. So just simply checking for a file and the hash value of a file against the database of a place like VirusTotal, which is really dope, and they have a lot of great resources that you can check because it's like a giant database of all the different viruses and whether or not something should be concerned, you should be concerned about something or not, right? So the next piece that's inside a playbook is the call tree, which is the list of the people that you should call and who needs to be notified immediately and who takes the lead and notifies everybody else. And that's really the kind of the best way that you can explain it. So it's like if somebody down here deals with something and found something in an email, for example, they would immediately tell their immediate supervisor, and the immediate supervisor would then tell their supervisor, and it would just go up the chain. If somebody in the upper part of the chain finds out that, hey, this is what's going on in the company and we've been hit like this, so if you get anything from this sender, if you get anything that resembles this is what I need you to do, or this is what you should not do. Same thing, right? So there's the call tree that in either order it can be found. And then in this particular example, there's somebody who could not be called, or there's somebody who should not be called, right? That would be also important to try to figure out. And if somebody was fired and they're not in this position anymore, if they quit and they're not in this position anymore, that means the call tree, that specific person cannot be reached, therefore they can't pass along the message. So it could even be like this, where it's like, this is the immediate person, the teller, let's say. This is the teller, this is the customer service supervisor, which is their immediate superior, and then this would be the branch manager, let's say, and then the branch manager reports to the district manager. And in this particular case, this teller didn't have their supervisor to communicate with, so that they need to know that they need to go to their branch manager, or for whatever reason, if this person can't be contacted or should not be contacted, maybe they're the suspect in the entire process. So the call tree itself is very, very important, and it's usually best practice to communicate when, if you're in doubt, just communicate with who your leadership is and let them know what's going on. The responsibility of the first responder, and so this is what happens. This is where you come in when it comes down to training people. So you may perhaps not be the one that's actually creating the playbook or even creating the call tree, but you maintain a responsibility that has to be to ensure that the division is prepared to deal with an incident. So if we continue with the example of a fire, for example, maybe you're not the one fighting the fire, but you are the one that needs to know where the fire alarm is, where the nearest exits are, where the fire extinguishers are, specifically if you need to handle it immediately, if it's a small enough fire or something. So when it comes down to cybersecurity, you have a responsibility to prepare the division for an incident and ensure that they understand where they can log an incident and who to contact in the event of an incident. So you may not be the one that's handling the incident, but they need to know who to contact immediately and what to do or what to not do in case they're suspicious of something. The term that best describes a defined process that the blue team follows during an incident, that's called a playbook. And the term that describes the structure used to inform all relevant parties is our call tree. So very, very easy, simple. Hopefully this is all making sense and it's easy for you to understand. So now let's talk about isolating the incident. All right, for isolation and containment, I want you to think about this particular image, right? So quarantine. When you quarantine somebody that, for example, is patient zero in a situation, or right now when I do it, it brings up everything from COVID and the pandemic. So let's say quarantine patient zero. I'll do that. Let's see what that shows us. Still, not so much. I'm trying to find the particular image that I think is really important. Okay, there we go. This one's a little bit better. So the quarantine bubble, if you can think about that, right? So it's like somebody catches something and somebody is sick, and you want to stop that from spreading. You want to prevent that from spreading. And so you put them in a bubble like this. That might be kind of drastic, but this is like the street version of this, right? Where this obviously is the person that either is sick or they have a weak immune system, whatever the situation is, and they are now in quarantine, not so they don't infect somebody, or if they don't get, so that they don't get infected. And that's the really, really big issue right here. So, what we are trying to do in a digital environment is we are trying to quarantine. I didn't want you to see that because I'm actually working on something, a cool piece of content that is going to come out. And if you're watching this and you notice that, you have you can obviously reverse the video or rewind the video and go and pause that particular frame to try to figure out what it is, and you'll get a good idea of what the upcoming video is going to be. But I'm really excited about that video. It's going to be a really cool video that's going to come out. So what we're doing in a digital environment, in a cybersecurity environment, is we're still need to contain the host that was infected. We need to contain the network that was infected. And once we've contained it, we need to eradicate the threat and then recover the system and the network to get it back to running as business as usual and making sure that everything is all good. So this is part of the NIST incident management framework, and these are grouped together, and it actually breaks apart to more steps that you need to take, but this is a legitimate series of steps. So you want to contain whatever the situation is, whatever the threat is, whatever the malware is, any of that stuff you want to eradicate, and then you want to recover the network and the system so that you can get back to business as usual. Containment methods in the context of cybersecurity are network segmentation, physical isolation, and virtual isolation. So network segmentation, as we talked about earlier, has to do with subnets and various segments of the network. So the host would be isolated from the network perspective by being placed into a different network segment. This isolation aims to ensure that the infection can't spread to other hosts, or you want to put them inside of a network segment that has been designed to be a honey trap. And this is it's like a really tricky little strategy. It's like one of those clever little strategies that you want the attacker to think that nothing's wrong, and you want them to continue to do whatever they were doing. And even more so, you want to give them a little bit of extra bait that they think everything's all good, and now, oh, what is this extra vulnerable device that's inside this network, and let me go and attack this particular device. And then if they do that, you reverse engineer their location, you reverse engineer their device. You can go look at their webcam on their computer or on their phone and whatever, and literally just reverse engineer everything about them just so you can find out who you're dealing with. So this is actually a really cool concept of putting the isolated host, or isolating the host from the part of your network that's actually important, and then putting them inside a part of the network, inside a segment of the network that is either there's no harm to be done, or there's a honeypot in there so that you can reverse engineer the attacker. I love this stuff. This is so freaking cool. Then we have physical isolation. So the host is collected and fully isolated from the network and users. For example, if it's a workstation or a laptop or an IoT device. And this aims to ensure that no further actions can be performed on the host and the evidence is preserved. And this is more for the actual user. So you want to take it away from the user so that the user accidentally doesn't do anything to tamper with the evidence. And then you have virtual isolation, which means the host is restricted from communicating through the use of software. For example, in endpoint detection and response, there's a lot of different programs that allow you to jail the host, meaning it's only allowed to communicate with specific entities on a network and perform certain actions. And the goal of this is very similar to confiscating the host, but can be performed remotely Furthermore, it's also if the EDR, meaning if the endpoint detection and response tool itself is compromised, that might not actually work for you. And this can also be done in the context of putting them, allowing them to communicate with a network device that is designed to be the honeypot. So you could still do that in this concept as well. So sending threat actors back to dial-up days. So this was when we referred earlier to not disconnecting them. So you don't want to disconnect the device from the internet because it might alert the threat actor and they might move on to the next step of their attack or do something even more harmful. So if you don't want that to happen, then what you do is you just the thing is actually very, very interesting. It's called rate limiting. So you rate limit that device, meaning you just basically slow them down, like slow that internet connection down to the dial-up days. I remember the dial-up days, and I remember getting 128 kilobytes per second, or kilobits. I'm going to say kilobits or kilobytes, whatever. 128 kilobits per second was like, oh my gosh, this is super fast internet. And now I have a gigabit, 1,000. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, I can't even imagine going back to the dial-up days because it's like pulling teeth. You have to wait. I used to have to wait like 15-20 minutes for a song to download that I could listen to it, and now you can instantly, at the click of a button, you can instantly stream that song without any kind of buffering or anything like that. So sending somebody back to the dial-up days in this specific context means you haven't disconnected them, so their malware is still connected and there's no flag that goes up. It's just that it's slow. So they don't suspect that we're onto them because everything is still working. It's just slow, and they have to use command and control channels, and they would be able to command and control channels typically means some kind of a command line interface, and they would not be able to pinpoint the exact problem that's causing their slow connection. So slowing down the connection allows the blue team to have more time to do their investigation and try to figure out exactly what's going on without alarming and alerting the threat actor, the hacker. So the responsibility of you, the first responder, or the security engineer, right? So the responsibility of the first responder is that they need to, again, manage this particular situation to contain if they know what to do, because this kind of stuff is the responsibility of a security analyst. So this kind of stuff is not something that a teller would do. However, they need to know that, hey, this seems fishy. This seems like something's going on. I don't exactly know what's going on, but this doesn't seem right. So I need to communicate with my branch manager and I need to communicate with the security department. So you, as the security engineer, may not be responsible for isolating the incident, but you will be relied upon as a subject matter expert to help the team understand what containment methods may be possible and to understand what the impact would be by implementing those containment methods. And that's your job as the security engineer, but the first responder would be the one that immediately notices something and communicates. So that's kind of the theme for a first responder, is like if they notice something, they're usually not the one that's going to take the action. They need advice from somebody. They need consultation from somebody to take the actions that they have to take. But they are the first responder, meaning they're the one that just noticed what happened. And so they're the one that needs to speak up and reach out and say, hey, I think something's going on. So what do I do? Right? That's what it is. So what containment method can be performed remotely using endpoint detection and response? And remotely talks about virtual isolation. What would be requires the blue team to collect the infected host, the machine itself. That would be physical isolation. And of course, what method aims to ensure that the infected host cannot communicate with other hosts or other devices in the network? And that would be network segmentation. And just like that, we are done with isolation. So let's go into the business continuity plan. So the business continuity plan, what they're talking about in this course is that it helps you gain some superpowers. So but this is assuming that you've contained the incident and you've done the things to that you got to do to prevent the incident from escalating and amplifying into something bigger. So once that's done, now you can kind of start thinking about, all right, how do we go back to business as usual, right? So your business continuity plan is probably going to be inside of your playbook. It should be inside of the incident management playbook, the incident response, incident management playbook. And it's literally the next phase. So it's like, all right, this is the first thing that you do. When you notice that something's going on, this is what you got to do to contain it. And then when we talk about recovery, as we talked about recovery, business continuity is a part of recovery. And there's actually another version of this, which is called the disaster recovery plan. And typically the disaster recovery plan is inside of the business continuity plan. So disaster recovery is more technical, it's more directed to the actual incident itself, how to recover from that disaster. And then once you have recovered from the disaster, this is what you do to go back to business as usual. And that's what the business continuity plan is. So first, to create one of these things, the first thing that you want to do a business impact analysis, which means what is the worst possible case scenario that would happen to this business if something hit the fan. And by doing this kind of an analysis, you can determine what would happen in the event of an incident and then how it would impact not just the organization, but the customers themselves, because it could be a data leak of customers. And now you're really in it. And now you really got to freaking do some damage control. So that analysis is usually performed using a combination of qualitative and quantitative measures. Then you have define the potential recovery actions. So based on the particular worst possible case scenario, you need to have a series of actions for each possible thing. I mean, we would literally go back to this thing right here. This is a version of, all right, so if this happens, then you need to do this. If that happens, then you got to look at this. Is there an attachment? Okay, if there is, then this is it. If there's a URL, then this is it. And then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you get to the end, right? And that's what a business continuity plan / disaster recovery plan does for a person. So when you do the potential recovery actions, you're doing, all right, if this was the situation, if this is what happens, this is the next step that you do. And then you do this, and then you do that. And so that's what that means. So for example, in this case, if one of the production servers becomes unresponsive and has to be isolated, you could potentially switch to your disaster recovery server, so your backup server basically. And documenting the recovery actions will allow the team to recover faster during an actual incident. And maybe if you're using some kind of a CSP, a cloud service provider, if you're using a cloud provider, you can automatically set it up that, hey, if something happens on this particular server, I just want you to automatically go to this backup server so there's no disruption of service for our customers. In the eyes of the customer, nothing happened. We're figuring everything out in the back end to try to figure out why this server just crashed. But in the eyes of the customer, nothing happened. It's business as usual for the customer. Then you can plan the BCP team structure. So the business continuity plan team structure. There are certain, obviously, if it's a big company or if it's a big incident, there's a lot of responsibilities. And those types of responsibilities need to be assigned for beforehand, right? Before anything actually happens, those things need to be assigned. And one of those things could be documenting actions and alerting stakeholders. There could be literally somebody that's just responsible for documenting everything, and then there's somebody that's just responsible for alerting the stakeholders. And these responsibilities have to be planned and documented together with the details of the individuals that would perform them. All of that needs to be done in advance, not when something happens, but way before something happens, so that you can do a tabletop exercise and you can rehearse all that stuff. And that's where we get to here. So testing the BCP plan, you do it doing some kind of a tabletop exercise. It's very similar to a table read when actors get together and they just go through the script just to get the beats of everything, get the flow of everything, so that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. This is no different. Rehearsal makes it so that when something actually happens, you've gone through it so many times during rehearsal that you're now just going through the motions, and your emotions aren't as high. You don't have as much anxiety because you've already gone through the worst possible case scenario, and you have a plan for the worst possible case scenario. That's what's very important. So once you've premeditated all of your responses and you've imagined the worst case and you've rehearsed that multiple times, you're cool as a cucumber when the actual incident happens, because you know exactly what you're going to do in each possible case. So BCP metrics, so business continuity plan metrics. So these are things that are very important to know in advance, right? So the recovery point objective is the amount of data that we're willing to lose, basically. So what is the maximum amount of data that you can lose before things become really, really bad? And if that is, for example, every hour, so if you can't lose more than an hour of data, then you need to do a backup. A backup needs to be running every single hour. That's what that is, right? So that's your recovery point objective. You can't lose more than an hour of service. You can't lose more than an hour of data, etc. Then there's the recovery time objective. So the amount of time that's required to recover your system. And what is that objective? So what's that goal for that recovery time? We can't be out of service more than an hour. We can't be out of service more than 30 minutes. That's our recovery time objective. Then the work recovery time, which is the amount of time that's required to recover the software and the data of your system. So the backup, basically, how to actually get everything back to functioning order. That's what work recovery time is. The maximum tolerable downtime, which is basically the RTO and the WRT combined. So RTO meaning the recovery time objective, the amount of time that's required to recover the system, and the amount of time that's required to recover the software and data of the system. Those two things combined can't exist this thing. So the maximum tolerable downtime, meaning the amount of downtime that you can tolerate, the maximum amount of downtime that you can tolerate can't exceed this particular amount. Then you have the mean time between failures, which is the average amount of time that the system can operate between incidents. What's that average amount of time? So between failures, we get a good 3 months of operating time. All right, that's great. Between failures, we get 1 month of operating time. Okay, that's not so good. Between failures, we get a week of operating time. That's pretty bad. You need to figure that out. Or we get a day of operating time between failures. That's really bad. Like, you really got to figure that out. You don't have a business. You're always putting out fires every single day. That's not good. So that's what that means. The mean time, the average amount of time between failures, between incidents. And then the mean time to repair, the average amount of time to recover something. If you have an incident every week and it takes you 4 days to recover it, you are in really bad shape, right? So that's what those things mean. So what does BCP stand for? It stands for Business Continuity Plan. What does DRP stand for? Which is your Disaster Recovery Plan. The BCP metric that is used to describe the amount of time required to recover the hardware of your system, the hardware of the system, is the recovery time objective. And what is the BCP metric used to describe the average amount of time that is required to recover the system? And that is the average amount of time required to recover the system is the mean time to repair. Mean is average. So your mean metrics, I actually learned this from algebra, and that was one of the useful things that I took away from algebra. Most of the things I use calculators for nowadays. But the mean metric, that's what that means. It's the average metric. So that's what we got for our business continuity plan, our BCP. And let us go into documentation of actions. Documentation is really important because ultimately you need to update your playbook, and ultimately you need to have a debrief type of a meeting, a lessons learned kind of a meeting, where you actually go through everything that just happened. And when something happened, this person gave this order, and that order had this effect. And the binary of that would be it either worked or it didn't work, or it worked or it made it even worse, right? So all of these things need to be documented so that after the incident, you can debrief and go through your lessons learned scenario. So The templates that are available, and there's a lot of these things, you can find them probably on the NIST website, you can find them by just Googling around, but these are some of the key points that need to be inside a template. Time at which the action was requested. So they should be in UTC just to make sure that everything matches depending on where people are across the globe or across the country. The time at which the action was requested. So somebody requested an action to be done. What time was that? What was the update or the action that was performed? The description of what was actually done. What was the reasoning to do that? Who was the person that approved that specific action? And who's the person that was responsible for performing that action? And then time that the action was actually performed. So the time that it was requested, what was requested, what was the reason for that request, who was the person making the request, who was the person completing the request, doing that request, and then what time did they finish that request, what time did they actually complete that action, and then what happened afterwards. Once they did that action, what happened? Did the situation get better? Did the situation get worse? So on and so forth. And what you see here is somebody updating an Excel sheet, but depending on how chaotic the situation may be, this might not even be possible. And again, based on what we talked about earlier, this is a pre-established person, like somebody was assigned documentation. This is their role. When something happens, your job is to take really, really good freaking notes. And in that particular case, if it's super chaotic or if there's a lot of people involved, if there's a lot of voices in the room talking and doing all these things, you may not even be able to do this appropriately, efficiently. So you might need to record the situation. You might need to record everything on your phone camera or on a voice recorder, just so you have all of the data running immediately, and then you can update and kind of check back with your document. So it's like you would be doing this documentation, obviously, but you're also recording what was going on, just so in case you missed anything or in case you needed some specific details, you have it. And then what's really good about recording is that you also get a timestamp that's associated with those things, and you can say, okay, at this time, this is what happened. At that time, that's what happened to the second, right? You get to be able to do that if you're actually doing the recording. So obviously the above specific thing was just essentially the person doing all of this, right? So the time that the action was requested, the description that was requested, so isolate the infected host. The reasoning for this is to make sure that the malware can't spread to the rest of the network. The person that approved the action was Jane Doe. The person that was responsible for performing was John Doe, and they completed at 14:39, so literally 5 minutes later. And the malware indication of compromise, so let's wait for that to load. But I'm assuming that the malware indication of compromise didn't spread, right? We're not seen on any other hosts in the same network. That's what the result was. So lessons learned, as we mentioned already. So documentation is very, very important for updating the lessons learned document to make sure that once something like that happens again, if something like that happens again in the future, now you're not guessing to do the right thing. You're going to do exactly what worked last time because you updated your playbook and you had your lessons learned from that. So what time format should be used in our incident notes to ensure that all the times match, and that is the universal time. So making great progress here. Last piece, handing over. So the handing over process. All right, so it says, congrats, you've served your role as a first responder. The blue team has fully taken it over, but we're not out of the woods yet. Make sure to support the team as they work on closing the incident. And what we're going to do here is we're going to view the site. And as soon as I click on this, there's going to be a timer that's going to run down. And now we have to respond accordingly. So an incident has occurred and you're the first person on the scene and have thus become the first responder. What are you going to do? You're going to preserve the evidence first. Then you rush on the scene and make sure that the evidence is preserved, making sure to take it into consideration the volatility of the evidence, and you make sure everything's preserved for the forensics team. But you're not out of the woods yet. What is the next thing that you got to do? You got to what? Raise the alarm or isolate the incident? I'm going to raise the alarm. Okay, great. Alerting everybody that has been involved in that there's an incident. A team is put together to help you, but you're not out of the woods. So what is the next thing that you want to do? Now you want to isolate the incident. Okay, great. Everything's been contained and isolated. and you make sure that nothing else is spreading. So what's the next thing after you contain it? Now you want to invoke business continuity. And you invoke business continuity. This makes sure that the team is equipped and make sure rapid changes are going on. So now what do you want to do? Now you want to document everything that just happened. Great, you documented everything that just happened. So what is the final thing that you do? You hand it over to the team. And great, blue team has arrived, and here's our flag. So very good, easy stuff. The first time I did this, I didn't realize that there was a timer running down. And I don't know what just happened. There was like a big bang outside. I don't know if you heard that. I wonder if that actually recorded. That was crazy. But yeah, the first time that I did that, I didn't realize that there was a timer, and I was just taking my sweet time going through it, and I was like, oh my God, this is actually about to, like, the clock is about to run down, and blah, 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 blah. Like, just some manufactured drama there. So that's it. That's it for our first responder situation. So hopefully you got some really good information out of this particular video, and now you know a little bit more about what it takes to become a first responder. All right, it's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker. I hope you found value in this video. If you did find value in this video, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you can become a part of our community, and maybe even drop a comment. The comment section is always going on. Look at that. We already have a couple of great new comments that come in that I got to respond to. But I mean, the comment section is always lit. There's always a lot going on, and people are asking questions, saying hi, whatever it is. So it would be amazing to also have you be a part of our community, and to hear from you. And if there's anything that I can answer for you, then great. This was a good thread right here. Look at this. This whole thing just went on. But yeah, it would be amazing to have you be as a part of the community. So like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on notification bell, all that good stuff, so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And yeah, it's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will see you in the next room. Later. All right, now it's time to actually manage a cyber crisis. So this is the very last room in our security engineer pathway, and in the last module of managing incidents, which is cyber crisis management. And we've learned a lot of great stuff so far, especially in managing incidents. And now it all comes together. And now we're actually going to manage a cyber crisis, which sounds pretty crazy to think about, but you know, it's supposedly an easy room, so we'll see how easy it actually is. The prerequisites are intro to incident response and management, logging for accountability and monitoring, and becoming a first responder, which should all be live, and you should have already seen it by now. If you haven't already seen it, then definitely go check those out, because I think we're going to be using all the information that we got from those rooms in this particular one. And the objectives today are how CMTs deal with a cyber crisis, the golden hour during CMT, and the golden hour phrase is also used in medical terminology and obviously in photography and things like that too, and how even minutes and seconds can matter, and the CMT process, and how security engineers can play the role of subject matter experts. And the CMT is the crisis management team. So you are probably going to end up on a crisis management team, and this will be directly applicable to you. So without further ado, let's jump into what is a cyber crisis. Okay, so in the first video in this specific module, we talked about a cyber incident, and then the difference of a cyber incident to a crisis, right? So you have a cyber crisis and then you have a cyber incident, and this is just a quick review of it, right? So a level 1 is a SOC incident, a security operations center incident. It's small enough that it can be done and handled directly by the SOC center, and you don't have to worry about it like a user reporting a phishing email. That could be easily handled on a level 1 basis. A level 2 is a CERT incident, and it's small enough that the team and SOC can take care of it, such as a single user that has interacted with a phishing email. So they reported a phishing email was level 1. Level 2 is they interacted with a phishing email. Then you have the CSIRT incident, which is level 3, and it's bigger, and it doesn't just require the SOC team, but it also requires incident managers, and there's multiple users that have interacted with the phishing email, and now it's turned into a little bit of a situation. Level 4 is critical, and this is a cyber crisis, right? So the CSIRT requires ability to invoke nuclear actions, such as an incident where ransomware is being deployed and the CSIRT needs to take the environment offline to protect the rest of the estate. That's a cyber crisis, right? So you have these 4 levels, and what we're talking about today is the 4th level. So how does the team actually decide the level of an incident? And this is what it looks like. This is actually, I love graphs like this. It brings everything together, and you kind of get a good understanding of this, right? So a low-level incident is what? You have a single user, so one person, and the impact is, this was inconvenient. Nothing happened, not big of a deal. It's just kind of a pain in the butt to deal with. Moderate ends up being that, okay, it's a single user, but they can't perform primary work functions. So that could be a single user that can't perform primary work functions. That could be a moderate situation. A multiple user situation that some of their work functions are impaired and there is some kind of a workaround that's in place, or it's everybody that's affected. So it's system wide, but it's low and it's inconvenient. So if it's system wide, but it's inconvenient, that's still considered to be moderate. And then when you have high level stuff, now you're only dealing with everything above these two, right? So it's multiple users, and either there's a really big situation that they can't perform their job, or it's a lot of users, but work functions are impaired and there's some kind of a workaround in place. And then there's critical. So it's everybody and everybody can't perform their functions, for example, or it's everybody and everybody's information has been stolen, something like that. That's where it becomes critical. And it's like, holy shit, now we gotta go figure this out. We gotta do something about this. So that's where this whole thing comes in place. So what is a cyber crisis? Now we kind of have a good idea to gauge it and try to figure out how to determine when something goes from a little bit of an inconvenience to, okay, this is a crisis, right? So while this is an example, most incident severity classification methods rely on measuring the scope of the incident against the number of systems or users that are impacted versus the difficulty of recovering the affected systems and assets. Therefore, if many users are affected on a critical system, this would usually result in the incident being rated critical, resulting in the CMT, the crisis management team, getting involved. And some organizations also add certain special rules to their severity matrix. For example, if any amount of customers are affected, look at that, the incident severity is rated as critical. So if customers are affected, even if it's 1 or 2, then this is a critical situation to deal with. So what would the severity rating of an incident be where multiple users are affected and the impact is medium? So we got multiple users and the impact is medium. That would be moderate. And what would the severity rating of an incident be where multiple users are affected and the impact is low? So multiple users, impact is low, and that's considered to be low. And what would the severity rating of an incident be where an entire business unit is affected and the impact is high? So entire unit, business unit, and the impact is high. That is a critical situation. All right, there we go. Making some good progress. Now let's jump on to the roles and responsibilities in a crisis management team. Okay, so in the consideration of a CMT, a crisis management team, you don't want everybody to be giving their input. You want most people to be taking orders, and you want 1 or 2 people who are the most experienced, the most knowledgeable, who have the highest clearances, security clearances. You want those people to be giving out the orders, and everybody else needs to be just following very, very specific and precise orders to the best of their abilities. So the example here is, while in most cases a democracy is the best solution, in this particular case, the opposite is true. So it should be an autocracy is the best approach for a crisis management team to make sure that actions are taken decisively without wasting precious time. And that's where democracy kind of fails, because like you want to hear everybody's opinion and, oh, I think we should do this and I think we should do that. And it's like, no, we're wasting time. The person with the most expertise, the person with the highest security clearance, so on and so forth, that's the person that's going to give out the orders, and everybody else needs to fall in line. And so in this part, the most the most extreme or extensive would be the CEO. That's the highest level, right? And so that is the person that ends up making the decisions. And it's very obviously extreme. So to share the responsibility of making that kind of a decision, the CMT will provide voting rights to key individuals, usually no more than 5 people, because you want to keep the voices low, right? The number of voices low. So it's still a small team and can request the actions that are taken. The responsibility is no longer just on one person, being the CEO. So here are the roles, in a crisis management team. You have the CMT chair, which is the person that leads the CMT. Usually it's either the CEO or the COO, or maybe the CIO, CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, CTO maybe, but it's somebody in the C-suite, a C-suite executive. The chair is responsible for leading the CMT, and as mentioned before, responsible for having the final say in what needs to be done during a cyber crisis. Then you have the executives, and this could be the CEO, COO, CIO, CTO, CFO, CISO, and they're not, this is in cases where not just the CEO is responsible for decision making. The executives would each be granted a voting right, and they ultimately will be held accountable for what happened during the incident, because they are involved in the CMT to ensure that the damage is kept as small as possible. Communication team is literally notice how it's right after the C-suite executives is the communication team, because they're the most important apart from those people. It's like once the decision has been made, the communication team needs to communicate it. They need to divulge all the information to the rest of the organization. So it could be communications that are being both internal and external, right? So internally to employees and externally to customers or externally to the press. And an important part of the CMT is staying in control of the narrative to help ensure that unnecessary panic is not created. So during cyber crisis, it's very, very important to have a strong communication team that knows what they're doing. And then you have the legal team. So it's important to ensure that the actual legal activities are being done so you don't do anything that makes the situation even worse. So a common discussion during cyber crisis is whether a ransom should be paid or whether their team will interact with the threat actors, right? We don't what's the phrase where it's like we don't succumb to terrorists, like we don't negotiate with terrorists. There you go. That's kind of one of those things where it's like, should we even interact with these people? It is important to note that in certain countries, these actions may not even be legal for the team to do. So it may not even be legal for you to pay a ransom or to even interact with the people who are trying to attack you, right? That's pretty crazy. Then you have the operations team. So the sole responsibility is to concern themselves with the best possible approach to ensure that the operations of the organization are affected the least amount possible during the cyber crisis. In certain cases, this is fulfilled by the COO. However, it can also be fulfilled by an entire team of experts that are looking for ways that business can continue during the crisis. Business continuity, right? We talked about that in the last video. And then we got the subject matter experts. So most of the members of the CMT are not technical, and they are members that are exceptional as business concerns, but don't usually concern themselves with the day-to-day complexities of actually running the organization systems. So during a cyber crisis, SMEs, subject matter experts, play a vital role in providing critical information to the members of the CMT. And then the CMT can use that information to scope which actions would be best to take and what the actual scope of the attack might be, or what the effect of the business might be. And this would most likely include the head of the Security Operations Center and or the incident management of the CSIRT team. And finally, we have the scribe. So note-taking is incredibly important during a cyber crisis, and it's important to create a full timeline of events, as often this has to be disclosed to other third parties, such as the government or regulator. And the role of the scribe is therefore important to detail all of the events and conversations during the CMT session. So scribe is an interesting title to give this to this person, because when I think of scribe, I think of like a scribe in the old Knighton days that like works with all the knights, and it's like their butler almost. But in this particular case, it's the person that's taking all the notes. So who's responsible for note taking? That is the scribe. And who's responsible for leading the CMT session? That would be the CMT chair, I want to say, right? Oop, not chair. Who's responsible for ensuring that the actions taken by the CMT do not break the law? And that would be the legal team. And who's responsible for making sure that the stakeholders are informed during the CMT? And that would be the communications team. And who's responsible for providing more technical information to the CMT to ensure that they can take the appropriate actions? And that would be our subject matter experts. And just like that, we got all the roles and responsibilities. So let's talk about the golden hour. The golden hour is the first hour, and this is actually very important in the medical world. If somebody has a stroke, the first hour after that person has a stroke can determine whether or not there's going to be permanent damage done to that person, or they can fully heal them, like they could totally recover based on whether or not how quickly that was caught. So in this particular case, it is just the same. So the first hour is very, very important. As more time passes, rebuilding what has happened becomes harder. Getting back to business as usual becomes harder. And so the CMT, the crisis management team, has to perform several really critical steps during that very first hour. Number one is assembly. So to assemble the team, make sure everybody's on point, on site, on Zoom, whatever it is. Everybody needs to be present in communication, and this usually requires that the key people are always on call. And so once the CSIRT decides to invoke the CMT, a process would be followed to notify all the initial CMT members that they're required to help with a cyber crisis. A playbook and call tree are created for this specifically, and it is incredibly important since some of the required members may not be available. For example, the COO can be stuck on an overnight flight. The replacement and the replacement's replacement should already be documented. So the backups and the contingencies should already be documented. Usually the CSIRT chair would be responsible for invoking the CMT and then performing the initial notification. From there, several members can assist in assembling the CMT. The team should also decide if the team would assemble remotely or in person, and what communication channels should be used. While this decision might sound simple, it's often harder than you can imagine. It would be that the CSIRT, or it could be that the CSIRT has a strong suspicion that their primary communication channel have been compromised by the threat actor, and therefore out-of-band communication has to be done. That's a big conundrum. The information gathering concept would be in that. So the next step is information gathering. Once the CMT has been established, the very first step is to understand what just happened and what do we need to do right away. For a cyber crisis, it's usually done in the form of CSIRT briefings, where the CSIRT provides that information. So they give you the summary of the information discovered up until this point. They give you a summary of the actions that have been already taken by the team and the effect that they had on the incident, and then the recommendations as to what nuclear actions should be taken immediately by the crisis management team. Then you have crisis triage, which is another term that is also used in the medical field. Once the CMT has been briefed, it's important for the team to triage the incident and consider the actions proposed by the CSIRT. So basically analyze and try to figure out what to do. And the CMT should think carefully about the impact that the actions would have on the organization and already think about what steps can be taken to limit that impact. And during the triage phase, the team will also decide on which other stakeholders should be involved in the crisis management team. And finally, notifications. So controlling the narrative is obviously very important. So one of the first steps that should already be performed by the CMT during the golden hour is to prepare and in certain cases send out communication both internally and externally. Usually, the CMTs would prepare by making use of holding statements. These are messages that do not divulge exactly what's happening, but provide reassurance that the team is investigating and will provide more feedback as information becomes available. This can help calm the situation as stakeholders are aware that the team is busy working on whatever the issue is. So, what is the first step that has to be performed during the golden hour? And that is what? To assemble. So assembly. And in the event of a cyber crisis, who provides the update to the CMT? And that is the CSERT team. There we go. Crazy stuff. All right. Now, the crisis management process, the CMT process. All right. So once the CMT has been established, and the golden hour actions have been performed, so this is past the first hour, there's a cyclic process that needs to be done to deal with the crisis. So golden hour is done. Now we go to information update. Then you go to triage, information update, and you go through this until you feel like you have everything, and you can move on to the action discussion. So what do we do? Action approval, action discussion, approval, discussion, approval, discussion. And you go through this until everybody has decided, all right, this is going to be our actual actions or series of actions. And then you're going to go through documentation and the disclosure of the crisis. And so it's important to note that during this entire process, the CMT remains static, meaning that rather than having members of the main CMT split off and find information, subject matter experts are used to bring in information. And this is because the CMT team, if they were to split off during a critical moment, it would waste time to assemble them again. And so the model ensures that the CMT can always receive critical information from either stakeholders or the subject matter experts. So information updates comes from various stakeholders. And this usually happens in the form of briefings with subject matter experts. And the goal is to provide the CMT with new information to better understand the scope of the crisis and what impact actions taken in the past have done on the crisis. The CMT decides how often these update sessions are performed. At the start of the crisis, these updates would often be more frequent. So as we mentioned already, the team already usually consists of the members that are not as technical. So subject matter experts are typically not technical people, but they do understand different parts of the business. So it's important that the SMEs provide the updated information in a manner that can be understood by the crisis management team. Usually, technical information is abstracted in the update, and the focus is more on the impact of what has happened and what actually needs to be done or what has actually happened. So that's kind of good to understand, honestly, because a lot of people I'm just imagining what like some random person in management in marketing is going to come through and try to explain to some nerd in the security team, and like that person's eyes just rolling back as this marketing person is like trying to use a specific technical jargon. I've done that a lot, where like somebody's trying to explain something to me and I'm like, dude, you're butchering it. Just give me your version. Like, you don't need to try to explain it to me in my language. Just tell me what the hell you think is going on. Then we got triage. So once the team receives the new information, the triage process has to occur again, and during this phase, the CMT decides if the severity of the crisis should be raised or lowered, and if any new SMEs should be involved in this, and they also need to decide if there will be any new communication sent out internally or externally. Then we move on to actions. So the discussions of the actions. So using what you got from the SME, the CMT has to discuss proposed actions. And the goal of this is to understand the impact that the actions would have on the company. And in this case, we're no longer talking about easy and small actions, so such as removing a phishing email, because that's level 1, right? It's like we've gotten into crisis mode. So we're talking about big things like restricting remote access to the environment by halting all the VPN connections or blocking all the ports, something like that. performing a domain takeback of the Active Directory domain, switching a system over to the disaster recovery environment. So these are nuclear actions. These are big actions that will affect the entire organization until decided otherwise. So these aren't light actions, right? You can't take these things lightly because it's going to, definitely it's going to impact the business. And the goal is to better understand that impact and allow the team to determine if there may be less impactful but still effective actions that can be taken. So can we do something that could still be effective, but it won't have as much of a severe impact on the business? And once you've gone through all that, probably in multiple cycles, the CMT chair is going to usually limit the amount of time for discussions, because you got to make sure that you actually move to some kind of decisive action, because you're wasting time. If you don't take action quickly, you're wasting time. So depending on the scenario, the situation may worsen with time. So if ransomware is being deployed from a central location, such as GPOs, group policy objects, the entire Windows environment would be encrypted within 120 minutes, meaning in 2 hours, the entire environment is going to be encrypted, meaning locked. And every single minute that the team discusses actions longer, the ransomware is spreading. Therefore, the actions or the discussions are limited before the team decides which actions will be followed. And as discussed, this is usually not done in a very democratic way. And it's usually a specific person that's making this decision. And these decisions are not made lightly, obviously, because they're going to be held accountable. Whoever that decision maker is going to be held accountable for this. So they could either be the hero or they could be the person that gets fired, right? Inaction, however, can even be much more detrimental, right? So more wars have been lost by inaction than the wrong action. That's an actual phrase. I think it's by General Mattis. Would you be able to make critical decisions choosing between the lesser of the two evils in a limited amount of time? That's kind of what that's what it means to be the CEO. So everybody's like, oh, I want to be the boss. I want to be the head of the company. It's like, yeah, but what if you got to do this now? What if you got to deal with some kind of crisis or catastrophe? And what if you make the wrong decision? Now what are you going to do? It's pretty insane, right? So documentation and crisis disclosure is the last piece of this, which once the crisis has been remedied, it has to be documented using the notes from the scribe. A crisis document is created, and the document details what happens during the crisis and what actions were implemented to deal with the crisis. And this information is not just for the archive, but can be used by the CMT to learn lessons, to add to the lessons learned document about the crisis and adapt their process to deal with something like this in the future. So, what is the term used to describe the process by which the CMT determines the severity of the crisis? And that would be triage. And who is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the CMT takes action? And that would be, I want to say, the CEO, right? So who's ultimately responsible? Oh, CMT chair. There you go. That's the person. So the CMT chair, the crisis management team chair, is responsible. Who will ultimately be held accountable for the crisis? And that's the CEO. Oof. All right. Let us move on to the importance of subject matter experts. All right, so members of the crisis management team usually have broad scope. So for example, the CEO runs the entire company. They have to make decisions about the entire company. So they probably have, extensive information about a few subject matters, but they're not expected to know everything in great detail about everything inside the company. This is why subject matter experts are hired in the first place. You want one person to be super experienced and super knowledgeable in one category, and that specific person goes and handles that department, right? That's what a subject matter expert is. So because of this, a CMT typically, or the CEO, for example, is known as a jack of all trades. And this is the case for most of the people that are inside of the CMT, this crisis management team. Then you have the people who are the masters of one, meaning that they are a subject matter expert. And so as a security engineer, you may be involved in a CMT if the crisis pertains to your specific division. And as a security engineer, you should have an incredible depth of knowledge for your specific system or asset and can therefore provide vital information to the crisis management team. They can only take effective actions, meaning the CMT can only take effective actions if the following is true: that they have an accurate understanding of the scope of the incident, including what has happened and what the impact is on the business. And it will never be possible to understand the full crisis scope because the investigation is still ongoing. But having as clear and possible having as clear as possible a picture is important. That's a weird phrase. Just basically getting the best clarity, or the best clarity on the situation is very, very important, right? Then the second thing is that the CMT has to understand what actions are available for them to take and what the impact versus the effectiveness of these actions would be. So they play a critical role, subject matter experts. They play a critical role in providing this information. As a security engineer, you have to understand the system best to know what potential actions can be taken to recover from the crisis. Then you will need to know how long backups are kept. You'll need to know whether the environment can switch to DR. I'm trying to connect what that would be. Disaster recovery. There we go. Whether or not they can switch to disaster recovery. You'll need to know what the impact would be if you have to take critical assets offline. So this is your specific subject matter that you need to be an expert in, right? And this information then has to be clearly communicated to the crisis management team to ensure that they make an informed decision. And without subject matter experts, it would be impossible to recover from a crisis. So who's responsible for providing the CMT with technical and in-depth information to allow them? And that would be subject matter experts. All right. And finally, bringing it all together, we have a site that we're going to interact with. So let's talk about actions available to the crisis management team. All right, so obviously there's technical responses that the CMT can take, but there are certain other things that they have to potentially do. And some of those things help control the narrative, and other things are actually required by law. So for example, internal communication is obviously communicating with the people inside of the organization. It doesn't just include messages that go to employees, but also communication that is prepared for key divisions such as the help desk. And depending on the technical response taken by the CMT, the help desk might receive an influx of support queries from the customers, right? To ensure that the help desk can actually assist those people to limit the spread of panic, the CMT will also prepare communications for them. While the team can create this communication during the crisis, it is often not recommended as limited time is available, which could lead to mistakes. Rather, the team should have already prepared holding statements that can simply be tweaked before being distributed, right? So you don't want them to try to come up with their own stuff. You will prepare it for them, or at least the CMT will prepare those communications for them, and then they can tweak those communications to adjust for their specific scenario, but they stay within that template to just make sure that they don't spend too much time trying to put together a message. Then you have external communication, which it doesn't just communicate or involve the communication that's sent directly to the customers, but such as comments to the press or interviews that are supposed to be performed. And it's become super vital in the modern era, and like very difficult to navigate because of social media. Somebody could just post something on Facebook or on Instagram or on TikTok, and next thing you know, it spreads like wildfire. So organizations will have to employ teams that will specifically take care of this communication during an incident, meaning communications to the press, to help ensure that the public is informed about what's happening without spreading fear and panic or misinformation or propaganda, and just do reputational damage or damage to the stock prices and all that crazy stuff that happens usually during something like this. So the next one is informing the regulator, and this is the one that's like a legal kind of a thing. Like you're bound to informing the regulator depending on the category or the industry that you're in. You may need to inform other third parties. In financial sector, organizations are usually required by law to notify their respective regulator if there is a crisis. And this is mainly because the crisis could have an impact on the entire country. So another common regulator that must be informed during a crisis is the information regulator. Jesus. If the crisis has resulted in the breach of customer information in countries that have to adhere to the General Data Protection Regulation. So in stuff like that, when information is being distributed, you got to inform the regulators. And they are going to be mad. Let me tell you, they will be pissed. Okay, so contacting law enforcement. Also, depending on the country of the organization, there may be a need to contact law enforcement. For example, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And usually these processes are defined by the CMT before a crisis and will be part of the playbook. Law enforcement agencies can often help with the investigation and help to ensure that the chain of custody of forensic evidence is followed to help with prosecution later. And exercising the CMT. So now that we actually understand this, it's time to actually do a lab. So let's click on this view site. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a time limit. So I'm going to jump into it as soon as I click it, and let's see what we got. Okay, so there's no time limit immediately. What do we got here? So welcome to the incident lifecycle game. Your mission is to navigate through the various phases of the incident, make strategic choices to minimize the damage to the estate and reputation. Remember, you have a limited credit for each phase, so choose wisely. Make sure to think about the options before selecting. You won't be able to make changes. Based on the incident, damage will be added to your estate and reputation. Pick the correct actions to minimize your estate damage and choose communication strategies. Yikes, I already have anxiety. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's do this. The incident lifecycle game. All right, here we go. Story 1. The SOC has just received multiple alerts of users reporting the same phishing email. The CISO discovered that the phishing email was used to deploy malware to workstations. You need to take actions. Okay. All right. Please select the questions you would like your SOC team to investigate. Be careful. Your team has limited time, so they won't be able to investigate everything. Do I have a timeline? Okay, no. There's no time limit running, but I got to choose the right thing. So how many users received the email? What was in the email? What does the malware do? So I'm going to say how many users received the email. Okay, great. 20 users received the email. Can we investigate which division these users work for? Can we investigate which users actually interacted with the email? All right, let's see. So what does the malware do? The remote access Trojan, captures keystrokes of employees. Where does it send the communication to? How does the rat spread across the network? Can we investigate which users actually interacted with it? Can we investigate which division these users work for? I'm going to do this one. They're in research and development. And where does the rat send the communication to? And how does the rat spread across the network? How does the rat spread across the network? It harvests credentials to spread. Okay. So now what? Now it says, please select the questions you want them to investigate. Be careful. Your team has limited time, so they won't be able to investigate everything. Okay, so next phase. All right, so now, now the CSERT power-up, action power-up, or communication power-up. We are going to do the communication power-up, right? So you deploy your PR team, you will receive assistance into making the best statements possible to contain panic. The team is placed into high alert. Next phase, you can ask double the amount of questions. Oh, interesting. Okay. Action power up. You deploy your first responders. Next phase, you can take double the amount of actions. And I can't do double the amount of actions if I deploy the PR team. Ugh, what the hell? All right, we'll do the action power up. And let's move on to the next phase. Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm missing two actions because I didn't ask enough questions, I think, in the investigation gaps. Okay, so remove the email from users' mailbox that have received the email, format the computers of all employees that received the email, reset the accounts of all employees that received the email, perform additional monitoring and investigation in the R&D division, and reset the accounts of employees that have the rat on their workstation. So, I mean, surgical strike and limit the bleed are going to be my decisions. And are we in the last phase? I'm in the last phase. And I'm not exactly sure what this means. So, expect 25 reputation damage in this phase. Your actions can mitigate it. Okay, so internal communication. There's an incident and we're dealing with it. That's going to be our thing. External communication. We are aware that our systems have become slow and are investigating. Please stand by. We are busy investigating an incident and we'll let the public know when we have more details. I'm going to do we are aware that the systems have become slow and we're investigating. Damn, that was stressful. All right, story number 2. After detailed analysis, the SOC determined that a phishing email delivered a remote access Trojan to workstations. These Trojans connected to a command control channel, granting threat actors control over malware, allowing them to gather data from compromised workstations and the environment. Prevent the spread. Okay. Okay, so investigate the command and control channel. DNS entry that is being used for the C2 channel. Let's investigate what information the rat enumerated, information about the server range and Active Directory. We're going to analyze the domain to see what's being hosted, type of control being used, and thus the actual malware strand of the rat. Okay, great. And the rat seems to enumerate information. So what is important here? All right, what servers? On jump host servers for remote that were being used to administrate privileged systems such as the domain controller. Okay. And no more choices, so let's go to the next phase. Deploy the first responders, next phase. Double, and team is placed into high alert, next phase, double. And of course, communication follow-up. And this is story 2. I'm still going to do the deploying of the first responders. So create a specialized indication of compromise for the rat and scan the environment for infections. Isolate all jump hosts until the threat has been neutralized. Well, I get 4 choices here. Okay, great. So I'm going to definitely do... Damn, there's questions I'm missing. I'm definitely going to do this. I'm going to do this. And so remove rat from affected workstations. Block the C2 channel on the perimeter firewall. Format the computers for all employees that have the rat installed. Reset the accounts. So we're going to block the C2 channel from the perimeter firewall and remove the rat from affected workstations. So where are we at here? I'm just going to choose the same exact communications. There's nothing different. And final story. I have no idea if I'm making good progress here. I feel like I'm not. Rats were used to spread the threat in our environment. A domain controller has been compromised according to SOC analysis. Users can't access files with encrypted desktop messages. Urgent action is needed before more of the empire... Oh, shit. So it's definitely ransomware, for sure. Okay. The questions you would like them to answer: from where is the connection made to our domain controller? What did the attackers do on the domain controller? How is the ransomware being deployed? Ransomware is originating from the domain controller, and how's the ransomware spreading? Can we analyze the ransomware? What did the attackers do on the domain controller? From where is the connection made to the domain controller? The threat actors have performed a DC domain controller sync, dumping the credentials of all the users. Sheesh. To where has the DC sync been exfiltrated to? Can we see any other new connections being made? Oh, this is a big one too. So instead of analyzing it, let's see how it's spreading. Are making use of group policy object to deploy the ransomware to all the windows in the network. And to where has the DC sync been exfiltrated to? Can we see any other new connections being made from the domain controller? I'm going to go for the new one. So the threat actor seems to use a DC connection to compromise other domain controllers as well. Okay. I don't get to choose. I see. So, okay. Perform a domain takeback. Revoke the ransomware deploying the group policy object. Remove the rat from affected hosts. Rotate the credentials of all domain admins. Rebuild workstations affected by the ransomware. We're going to rotate everybody's credentials and remove the rat from affected hosts. Rebuild workstations affected by the ransomware. I would say I'm going to rebuild them. Okay. We're dealing with the incident. We are aware that the system... The choices for these things are exactly the same. And okay. Oh, shit. Okay. So I did it. Very good. So estate damage 45%, reputation damage 45%. All right, man. I honestly thought I was failing. But okay. All right. I think I made some good decisions. I spent a lot of time thinking between those decisions. Obviously, it's all going to be cut out in the edit, so you'll see the decisions being made quickly. But I really sat here for a while trying to... I'm like, damn, what should I do? But okay, there it is. Congratulations, we progressed. I would love to see if you go through this. I want to know what score you got, because I got 45% on both those. So when you go through this, I want to know what score you got, and if you can beat my 45%. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are officially done with the crisis management as well as everything inside of Security Engineer. The Security Engineer pathway is now complete. I hope you hung out with us all the way to the end. I hope you've seen everything from the very beginning all the way to the end of this. And I'm about to get a certificate on here, but I'm not going to click on this because it's going to reveal my real name. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you learned from this, and hopefully you found everything inside of this useful. There's going to be a playlist called the Security Engineer playlist that will have all of the videos from this path inside of that playlist. So in case you missed any of them, you can go to the Security Engineer playlist, and all of these videos, everything from here to here to here. The network and system security one was a really big one. A lot of people love the compilation of this. It actually is the highest performing video on the channel right now. And then software security was also a really big one. And now we are with managing incidents. So I really hope you got some value from it. I hope you learned a lot from it. And if you have not already, I would recommend that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, drop a comment, and join our community, our ever-growing community. I very much love this community. These are the comments that are coming in, and I mean, I literally can keep scrolling, and it's just going to keep loading more and more comments because people are just so awesome, and they drop so many comments in here. So it's been a really great ride so far, and I feel like I say that at the end of every single video, but honestly, this has been a really great, humbling experience, and I'm very happy to hear and to see that so many people are getting so much value from it. So would love to see you in the comments, would love to see you as a subscriber, and like the video, share the video, turn on the notification bell, do all that good stuff. So hopefully you got value from it, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the community as well. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. Hope you got value from this video. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will see you in the next video later.